Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump is expected to make an announcement this afternoon, moving the U.S. Space Command headquarters from Colorado to Alabama. A federal judge in San Francisco ruled today that it wasn't lawful for the president to use the National Guard to protect immigration agents from Los Angeles protesters. An appeals court has cleared the way for the Trump administration to eliminate climate grants. Members of Congress are back in Washington, D.C. following their summer recess. What to expect? What might be the impact of cashless bail on public safety? We talked to a nationally recognized advocate for criminal justice reform. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow never opposed Ukraine's potential membership of the European Union.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us on this Tuesday. A federal judge in San Francisco today ruled that the Trump administration violated federal law when it mobilized nearly 5,000 National Guard troops to quell protests in Los Angeles. Trump federalized California's National Guard in June and deployed them to Los Angeles to protect immigration agents from violent protesters. Judge Breyer said although there were protests, there was no rebellion, which he ruled is necessary to activate the president's authority. He concluded that local law enforcement was able to respond to the protests and enforce the law. Nearly all National Guard troops were demobilized in July, with about 300 remaining. The Trump administration is expected to appeal the decision. U.S. lawmakers are returning to Washington today. They face a fast-approaching government funding deadline, questions over Epstein files, and crime bills to match President Trump's crackdown. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the report.
Government funding is the most urgent issue on the Capitol Hill agenda right now. Lawmakers face an end-of-the-month deadline to fund the government and avoid a shutdown. A key consideration here is the fact that Republicans need Democrat buy-in to get it done. This could be problematic considering the fact that Republicans continue to pursue spending cuts. Added into the mix, the White House is now requesting Congress to approve another rescissions package, $4.9 billion in cuts to foreign aid. We're also expecting to see several high-profile votes on the House side, including one related to the Epstein files. House Speaker Mike Johnson over the weekend hinted that lawmakers are on track to release them.
The administration have been fully compliant with Congress's subpoenas, and they've submitted over 34,000 Epstein documents already. Our House Oversight Committee is doing their due diligence so that we can release it all.
And over in the Senate, several of President Trump's nominees are still awaiting confirmation. Leadership in the Senate may try to change the rules in order to fast-track them as Democrats continue to employ tactics to try to slow-walk those nominations. And as the president pursues a crime crackdown in D.C. and other high-crime cities, it's likely that Republican leadership will put forth several crime-related bills. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Congress is back in session. Joining us now to discuss what to expect is Mike Leon, NTD News contributor and host of the Can We Please Talk podcast. And we have Tony Kinnett, national correspondent at the Daily Signal and host of Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. Good to see you both again. I hope you guys had a good holiday. And before we get into what to expect with Congress, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, she said on X that there will be an announcement today from Trump about the Department of Defense. Maybe it could be a name change. Tony, how do you feel about calling it the Department of War again?
Well, first of all, good afternoon to you both. I think it's a good decision. I do. I think renaming things, a lot of the classical American institutions, makes the point of levity of the idea of defensive actions no longer something that Americans hold to. Rather, that war is a very serious thing, and that when you speak softly and carry a big stick, the name should in fact reflect that, and therefore those actions should be taken with gravity. If instead it's moving the Space Force, somewhere else to a different state or something like that, I'm interested in seeing where that particular complex or series of industries go. And I'm kind of looking forward to this one. I'm interested.
Okay, Mike, quick reactions. How do you like the sound of Department of War?
From the person who ran on No New Wars, I don't like renaming the Department of Defense the Department of War. That's just me personally. I'm opposed to all war. I'm opposed to weapons of war that we have roaming the streets, like we saw in the Minnesota shooting and other school shootings that have happened. So I'm opposed to that. But I will echo something that Tony did say about, I was interested in this briefing to find out that it potentially could be moving something from a blue state to a red state. How does that impact different sectors? And will we see more of that in line with the second administration this time around? I'm interested to see how that all shakes out for sure.
All right, I'm sure we'll have more opportunities to talk about this. But Tony, what are you looking out for in this session of Congress, and what is the most significant item in your view?
Well, I'm sure we're going to get the question for the 837th time. Can Speaker Mike Johnson cobble together enough support? Yeah, the man works in small majorities. I think the more interesting question here is what Congress does in order to pass what is likely to be another continuing resolution. You've had statements from Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer all of a sudden saying bipartisanship is the way to go after calling their political opponents everything short of the devil down out of Georgia. So I'm interested in seeing this total flip turnaround, and I honestly wouldn't be terribly surprised if you saw Democrats trying to pull something that the Texas Democrats did via redistricting. I think that we are in the season of political theater, and if you think that it's calmed down, oh, buddy, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Okay, Mike, what are you focused on?
Yeah, I mean, Tony touched on a couple of things there, but let's start with the biggest elephant in the room. He's not even alive anymore, and that's Jeffrey Epstein and these files, and Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie and their potential bill and this House vote that will happen. That's number one. Number two, and we just covered it in the last episode of the Can We Please Talk podcast about the National Guard and DC and the president being within his authority to do that in DC, but he needs the extension past these 30 days to have congressional approval. Where does that all shake out? We just saw what the judge's decision kind of weighed in terms of the California National Guard. We talked about that as well on the latest episode. But one thing that I think a lot of people aren't paying attention to, something I'm looking forward to in the fall chamber outside of Congress, is also the Supreme Court and their docket coming up. But there's something in Congress that's very interesting right now. There's a bill that's kind of stewing around this Fair Tax Act and abolishing the IRS. I don't think it'll get a lot of support. Right now, it has no co-sponsors from Democrats. It has 14 Republicans that are interested in it. But it is interesting. Abolishing the IRS, do I get some of that tax money back? Americans want to know some of these things. And so that's one of the bills that I think will be interesting if that ever gets taken up in this fall.
Okay, Tony, I want to follow up on what you mentioned about government funding. Why do we hear more often, than we like about the threat of a government shutdown? Give us your view on the budget process in Congress.
Well, there hasn't been a budget process for a very long time because Congress is not constitutionally required to effectively balance and pass a budget. Since you no longer have single kind of line item bills, things just get, again, shoved together in this weird parliamentarian rules mess that is essentially ends up being more loopholes than an actual bill itself, pushing some funding over here, saying this is going to sunset in 2028 when actually it's not going to sunset. It'll just go on forever. Fiscal irresponsibility has just become the party that spends a ton and the party that spends a ton and a half. And so I'm interested in seeing this budget process that will end up being, again, the political theater of saying, well, my opponent wants to kill all puppies. And that's not what the bill says, but there is one element inside the bill that would say provide health care for puppies. And if you don't vote for that, then you're evil. I mean, this has been that kind of stuff. You heard it with the health care thing. Oh, Americans are all going to lose health care. It's going to be terrible. And really, the provisions were a lot more strict and specific. I don't know. The long-term implications of a budget bill like this are likely going to be middling. That's not a good thing. I think that the budget should be the centerpiece of the legislature. But I don't believe we've yet hit the point where Congress is going to have the fire under them for the future insolvency of things like our entitlement programs. And until then, the budget is just going to be a bloated, sluggish monster, if you'll pardon all of the colloquials today.
So, Mike, you think has Congress become reliant on measures like continuing resolutions instead of passing full appropriation bills?
Don, I'm nodding along with you. You just said what I was about to say, almost as if you have my answers here. Did you steal them? Because again, how many times in the last 2.5, 3, 4 years have we heard the term CR, 45 days? Everyone and their mother, if you follow American politics, you watch any network, you will know those two letters and you will know that it's a 45-day. It's just continuing to punt the football down the field. It's, you know what, we'll deal with that in the fall session. You know what, we'll deal with that in the spring session. And here we are yet again, where Tony is right about the political theater of all this, because you need 60 votes, in the Senate for something to pass, which means it's going to require at least 7 Democrats to buy in. So there is going to be the political theater of it. To Tony's point about, I would have made a different analogy on the puppy thing, but I totally get it. Sarah McLachlan notwithstanding, but he's right. There's the political theater of it, and it's because of what is happening with these continuing resolutions and never having this true solution. And that's what we get in American politics. And this is why, by the way, people are frustrated with American politics, because they don't understand the process that Tony and myself have outlined here, and you as well, Don. But then the other part of it is like, okay, so what happens after September 30th? Am I shut down? Do I lose my job? If I'm a federal worker, what does that mean for me? Yeah, it does mean you may get furloughed, you may get let go for all intent and purpose. So I think there's a lot of moving pieces with all this, and a lot of people just don't understand it. They just see the political theater in all of it.
So Tony, one point here: how are Republicans going to get the 7 Democrat votes? What's that process going to look like?
Well, it's not necessarily likely that they'll need to. Again, you can get kind of a pseudo-nuclear option if it's a non-additional expenses kind of a situation. Whether or not the rules will be able to be overridden or not is kind of up to anyone's guess here. The idea that likely you're going to have Democrats say, well, we want all of these spending measures in, when Republicans will say, no, meet us halfway. And then, as we've heard from the last 2 continuing resolution fist fights, where guys like Mike and I are up until 2 a.m. covering the last minute 30th vote on whatever, that the answer from the Democrat leadership comes back, no, we're not going to compromise on this. And Republicans aren't going to compromise the other way, because a lot of that alleviates some of the big things that Republicans ran on in the last election. And so you inch closer to a full nuclear option in the Senate. And again, this is one of the interesting points to watch, is increasingly things like the budget become hyper political culture wise, where each side is called evil for micro items in the legislation. That eliminates any opportunity for compromise, because Susan Collins, the Republican of Maine, is going to be called evil if she sides with Republicans on this. And then John Fetterman of the Democrats in Pennsylvania is going to be called evil if he sides with Republicans on this. And so essentially what you have is this endless loop of, again, political theater, because it's all about getting to that midterm campaign session in 26 and making more promises that no one's really going to solve the root causes of anyway. I know Trump has some cuts that he's looking to swing through. I'm interested in seeing what other things are kind of put up in order to balance that out. And so likely we'll just get some more football kicking.
Okay, Mike, you can respond if you would like to, but there's another thing I want to talk to about today, and that's lawmakers potentially will have to address a White House request to cut $4.9 billion in foreign aid, and it's known as a pocket rescission. So, Mike, does using a pocket rescission, in your view, infringe on Congress's power over spending decisions?
Yeah, well, to piggyback on something Tony said there, I wake up the next morning and read what happened. I'm not staying awake until 2 a.m. So sorry about that, Tony. But
we were so lucky.
Yeah, exactly. But, listen, in terms of foreign aid spending, like right now, this has been the push and pull that we've seen, Don, with respect to foreign aid and assistance. We've seen cuts at USAID. We've seen now these wars right now, what we're going to do in terms of spending weaponry and providing aid to some of these countries and weapons to some of these countries, Israel's for an example. So to answer the broader question is, does it overreach on Congress's authority? I'm to a certain extent. But I also think right now, I think foreign policy is kind of a little bit higher up the totem pole right now, at least in this fall session, speaking with a couple of House Democrats like we've had on the show during the summer months, right before the break, and Speaker Johnson gave everybody the recess break. One of the things we talked about, and speaking to Representative Johnny Ozowski, for example, from Maryland, I think the second or third question I asked him was about how his constituents have digested what is happening in Gaza, because he's getting those questions in town halls right now. He's getting asked, what are we going to do about the kids that are starving in Gaza? What are we going to do about how much money we give to Israel in terms of weaponry? So it's something that's coming up for these folks out on the trail. To Tony's point, 26 is coming up not that far away, right? Where we're going to start in some states, we're going to start, some primary processes. And so everyone's kind of looking towards that. Well, if you're looking towards that, you got to go back out on the road. And what you got to go back on the road voters, you got to champion what you've done in Congress. And if you haven't done anything in Congress, well, why are you still in office in Congress? And so those are some of the things that's kind of the way that I look at it, Don.
Okay, Tony, final thoughts on anything we talked about today, and how do you view the pocket rescission?
Well, I mean, as far as the pocket rescission is concerned, this is what happens when Congress abdicates its duty. Again, creating all of the federal agencies that are as bloated and as large as they are. You have congressmen and women who are more interested in running for re-election than they are actually sitting down and doing the hard work of governing. Again, with the massive amount of laws, that is a heavier workload. I understand that comes with a large federal government. It does, in fact, tax the very balance of power. I mean, I understand the concerns on both sides of that concern. But regarding all of these, I will say, it is very difficult to get the American public worked up over in arms about budget bills anymore. It's not 98. And unfortunately, Americans, the Democrats have tried over the last couple of months to run on, Americans don't like the big, beautiful bill. I've looked at the polling. The questions that they are touting as the proof for that, they aren't asking people about that at all. They're asking very vague, kind of awkward questions that don't seem to address whether or not Americans are concerned about the bill. This is kind of political theater right now, just because we know that it has to be innately. So as to whether or not Congress does anything that resonates with voters, I mean, this would be the first time in the last couple of years I've seen a budget process. The big green bill or whatever his infrastructure bill in the Biden administration was supposed to get Americans up in arms. It didn't. The big beautiful bill was supposed to get Americans up in arms. It didn't. So Americans like to see effects more than I guess they are concerned about bill fights in Congress. Again, unfortunately.
Well, okay, good discussion today. That's our time. Thank you both, as always. Pleasure having you, Mike, Tony.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, guys.
The Justice Department is suing Illinois for providing in-state tuition and scholarships for students in the U.S. illegally. The DOJ argues that the policies discriminate against American citizens. The department says institutions of higher education violate federal law by providing benefits to illegal aliens that are not offered to U.S. citizens. According to the complaint, quote, Illinois has an apparent desire to win a race to the bottom as the country's leading sanctuary state. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Illinois said, quote, this policy treats illegal aliens better than U.S. citizens living in other states. The U.S. Attorney said that such policies incentivize illegal immigration, adding, quote, Illinois citizens deserve better. The Trump administration has been cleared to nix climate grants approved by his predecessor. A previous judge had required the administration to continue funding $16 billion worth of grants. Those grants were meant to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Today, a federal appeals court overturned that judge's ruling. This allows the Environmental Protection Agency to terminate the grants. A trial for a man accused of trying to assassinate President Trump will soon begin. Ryan Ruth faces charges for allegedly plotting to kill Trump for weeks before aiming a rifle through the bushes as Trump played golf in Florida last year. Ruth will represent himself during a pretrial conference today. Jury selection is scheduled to begin next Monday. A Secret Service agent spotted Ruth before Trump came into view. Officials said Ruth aimed his rifle at the agent. The agent then opened fire. Prosecutors say Ruth dropped his weapon and fled without firing a shot. Law enforcement obtained help from a witness who prosecutors said informed officers that he saw a person fleeing. The witness was then flown in a police helicopter to a nearby interstate where Ruth was arrested. Ruth was a North Carolina construction worker who had moved to Hawaii in recent years. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow never opposed Ukraine's potential membership of the European Union. Stay tuned for that and more when we come back.
Big things are happening at Mathis Home. Get Labor Day deals and save on everything for your home. They have hundreds of sofas and sectionals with styles you love at unbeatable prices, and they're the only place with top name recliners starting at just $199. Check out the latest looks in bedrooms and dining rooms and save big. Plus, you don't have to wait. They're all in stock with fast and easy financing and free delivery. Don't miss out. These Labor Day deals are happening now in every department at your furniture superstore, Mathis Home.
According to ancient Chinese medicine, purslane is considered a medicinal herb and is used to help lower cholesterol, improve vascular functions, and prevent diabetes. Perilla seeds can nourish the lungs and spleen. It is used to treat asthma and improve pulmonary functions. Puritan green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds from Hwangmae Mountain in South Korea. It contains over 90% of omega-3, 6, 7, and 9, the highest concentration possible without chemical additives. The soft gel is made of natural seaweed. It is 100% organic and vegan. Both adults and children can take it with peace of mind. Ancient recipes were passed down from heaven to bring prosperity and longevity. Puritan green vegetable omega-3.
There's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The wolves surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this little girl remains unmoved.
The Trump administration is preparing to defend its sweeping tariffs in the Supreme Court. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, says the case is critical to both America's economy and the fight against fentanyl. Here's the story.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he's confident the Supreme Court will uphold President Trump's tariffs. Bessent told Reuters Monday he's finalizing a legal brief for the U.S. Solicitor General, underscoring the urgency of the tariffs. The Solicitor General will oversee the government's appeal to the Supreme Court. The move comes after a divided appeals court ruled Friday that most of the tariffs are illegal, but allowed them to remain in place until October 14th while the case advances. Bessent says the tariffs are justified under emergency powers, citing both rising trade deficits and the fentanyl crisis linked to about 70,000 American deaths each year. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro issued a stark warning on Monday, saying the fate of the United States rests in the court's hands.
This case is arguably the single most important economic case that has ever come before the Supreme Court.
He said if the lower court's ruling is upheld, it will be impossible for America to defend itself from fentanyl poisoning and what he called the hollowing out of supply chains.
By the end of the day, we'll lose another couple of hundred Americans. It's over 1 million since the fentanyl war against America started. And if that's not a national emergency, I don't know what is.
Secretary Bessent told Reuters the brief would be submitted Tuesday or Wednesday. He said it would focus on the idea that U.S. trade deficits were reaching a tipping point that could lead to far greater consequences. At the same time, Bessent said the administration is considering the declaration of a national housing emergency over high costs. That could mean tariff exemptions on key building materials to help lower construction costs. Bessent also spoke to Reuters about Trump's firing of Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. He said that Cook should be removed or step down if the allegations against her are true, and noted that she had not denied them. Trump fired Cook last week after the new head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, William Poulter, accused her of mortgage fraud. Cook is suing the Trump administration, saying Trump did not have the legal authority to remove her.
India's trade minister says his country is looking for a deal with the U.S. His comments come after Washington doubled the tariffs on goods from India in response to New Delhi's continued imports of Russian oil. A punitive 25% tariff adds to President Donald Trump's prior 25% duty on products from India. Total duties as high as 50% will hit garments, jewelry, footwear, sporting goods, among other imports. The tariff is among the highest imposed by the U.S., similar to tariffs applied to Brazil and China. U.S.-India trade totaled $129 billion in 2024. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in China to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, but he will not be showing up to the massive military parade in Beijing tomorrow. The parade marks 80 years of the end of World War II and the victory over Japan. Indian sources say the Indian delegation will currently visit China and not attend the military parade. They say they don't want to hurt relations with the Japanese government. India, Japan, the US, and Australia are all members of the Quad military cooperation framework. Modi is in China for a summit backed by the Chinese regime, which signaled opposition to the US. But his visit to China came right after he visited Japan and emphasized their strong ties. North Korean regime leader Kim Jong-un has arrived in Beijing for a military parade tomorrow. He's joining other leaders from nations closely tied with Communist China and largely opposed to the U.S. Kim and Russian President Vladimir Putin are among the world leaders who will join Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. The military parade is for the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. It's set to be Kim's first time attending a major multilateral event during his 14-year rule. It's also the first time Kim, Xi, and Russia's Putin have gathered at the same venue. Other leaders attending the event tomorrow include those from Iran, Pakistan, Vietnam, and Belarus. Taiwan says its current security environment is more severe than ever before due to the actions of Communist China. President Lai Ching-te issued the warning today at a ceremony marking the eve of Taiwan's Armed Forces Day.
The current security environment is more severe than ever before. In recent years, the Chinese Communist Party has continued to conduct intensive military aircraft and naval operations around the Taiwan Strait, even combining gray zone harassment and cognitive warfare tactics in an attempt to alter the status quo in the strait and undermine public confidence.
Lai says China's actions are not only a threat to Taiwan's democracy, but freedom as well, and also a challenge to the entire democratic world. Lai underscored that this year carries symbolic weight as it marks the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. He drew historical parallels from both the global conflict and Taiwan's own defense during a 1958 artillery bombardment. The ceremony comes as Beijing prepares a high-profile military parade tomorrow to commemorate the end of the Second World War. Taiwanese chip giant TSMC won't be able to ship key equipment to its main facility in China easily. The U.S. has revoked the company's fast-track China export status. The privilege, known as validated end-user status, ends December 31st. This means future shipments of U.S. origin chip-making tools to TSMC's site in China will require individual licenses. This will slow deliveries and make capacity expansions or technology upgrades more difficult. The U.S. has steadily heightened export controls to curb China's access to advanced semiconductors and chip-making tools. It has expanded licensing requirements and revoked waivers for some foreign-owned China chip facilities. Microsoft has agreed to give government agencies a discount on its cloud services. Today's announcement from the General Services Administration comes as the White House looks to make deals with tech companies. According to the GSA and Microsoft, the deal will save the federal government up to $3 billion in the first year. As part of the agreement, the company will offer free access to Microsoft Copilot to existing federal government users. Copilot is Microsoft's AI chatbot. Agencies can also get lower prices on cloud products such as Microsoft Sentinel and Azure Monitoring. The GSA has announced similar deals in recent weeks. In August, the government announced that Google and Amazon Web Services had agreed to discounts. Now over to China. Political economist Chenggang Xu grew up in Mao's China and was beaten and imprisoned during the Cultural Revolution. Today, he's a Stanford scholar and author of the new book, Institutional Genes. Xu told American thought leaders that Beijing has long deceived the world about its true intentions. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports.
Political economist Chenggang Xu says the nature of the Chinese Communist Party is fundamentally different from conventional political institutions.
The Chinese Communist Party is actually a part of the Soviet Union Communist Party. So it's a historical fact that it was created by Soviet Union, and from the very beginning of establishing the Chinese Communist Party, it followed all the basic principles, basic rules of the Soviet Communist Party.
According to Xu, the Communist Party isn't a political party in the true sense. He points to Max Weber's definition, which describes political parties as voluntary groups competing for votes and power.
A communist party does not allow other organizations exist. So it controls all organizations. It's not within, it's above. So all the organizations have to be controlled by the Communist Party. And also, it's not voluntary. So entering and exiting from the party, these are not voluntary. A Communist Party is a secretive political organization from the very beginning till today.
In his book Institutional Genes, Xu traces the Communist Party's roots to secretive terrorist groups.
The so-called Communist Party is a creation of Lenin. But actually, Lenin didn't really create such an important institution from scratch. Instead, Lenin inherited these principles from those terrorist organizations. A leading example is the organization called People's Will. This People's Will Party, they call themselves as terrorists. And their core strategy is using terrorist approach to achieve their political goals.
Xu says Lenin and all the main founders of the Bolsheviks were originally from those secretive terrorist organizations. He says that is why Lenin could successfully reconstruct all the principles inherited from the existing terrorist secretive organizations into principles for communists. The political economist says the brutality of the Communist Party comes from two major sources.
One source is the idea that there exists only one truth. The truth to prevail. For the truth to prevail, you have to eliminate everything wrong.
That ideology, according to Xu, is key because it provides justification and legitimacy. The other part, he says, is in practice, with a whole structure based upon the secretive terrorist organizations.
There is a tradition to eliminate your political rivals. So your political rivals become enemies. So they will not allow for the existence of anyone who is going to disagree.
Within this kind of structure, the fight for political power is a brutal life and death struggle. Xu points to Stalin's great purges in the Soviet Union, China's Cultural Revolution, and today's anti-corruption campaigns as examples of that ruthless continuity. And Xu warns the danger is growing. He says China is no longer hiding its strength. With rapid military expansion and a shift toward a semi-military economy, Beijing is signaling its intent to project power abroad. Ignoring this, he says, could have fatal consequences. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The Republican Study Committee is holding a press conference on Congress to keep D.C. safe and clean. Let's take a look at that.
Legislation. Section 740, the Emergency Control of Police in the D.C. Home Rule Act, grants the President of the United States the ability to mobilize the Metropolitan Police Force when it's determined that special conditions of an emergency nature exist for federal purposes for a period not to exceed 30 days unless further extended by Congress. President Trump has lawfully exercised this law. On August 11th, President Trump issued a memorandum directing the Secretary of Defense to mobilize the D.C. National Guard. While governors control their state guards, the D.C. mayor does not control the D.C. Guard, which is under the control of the president. D.C. has seen major improvements in the incidence of crime in the last 3 weeks with the help of federal intervention. Homicide rates are down by 38%. Robbery is down by 62%. The total violent crime is down 45%, and carjackings are down 78%. Other governors and mayors should look at these improvements and welcome support from the government to keep their citizens safe. It is up to the governor of each state to decide if deployment of their National Guard is needed to help decrease violence and prioritize safety. It is important to note that ICE and other federal law enforcement has jurisdiction over illegal alien crimes everywhere in this country, and those governors and mayors do not have the legal right to declare their jurisdictions to be sanctuaries from federal law. I'm Harriet Hageman. I represent the great state of Wyoming. I am the chairman of the Article 1 Task Force, and I now turn it over to Chairman Pfluger of the RSC.
Well, I want to start by thanking Congresswoman Harriet Hageman, who is the chairwoman of the Article 1 Task Force. And she's doing a great job. And we're surrounded as well by my colleagues who come from a variety of states, but come here to do the right thing. And unfortunately, we're having to turn our attention in Congress on doing what the District of Columbia, its mayor, and their leadership should have done long ago, and that's to keep this city safe. For too long, we have watched liberal activists like those right there parading as politicians to turn our nation's capital into a crime-infested embarrassment. D.C. became one of America's most dangerous cities because of failed soft-on-crime policies that devastated innocent families while coddling the very criminals terrorizing our states. And it made our capital unsafe for residents, for visitors, for members of Congress, and unfortunately even for our interns and our staff. President Trump has rightfully exercised his authority to restore law and order here over the last few weeks. And what a tremendous job our federal law enforcement officers have done for this city. This is what happens when you have leadership that actually cares about public safety. This is what happens when you have a president and a Congress who are focused on restoring law and order to this great country. Thank the good Lord that we have President Trump back in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, Congress must take the next step and use our Article 1 powers. We cannot and will not allow D.C. to fall into a hellscape again. When the local government fails, it's our constitutional duty to act. Congress has a clear constitutional authority over D.C., and we will use it without hesitation to continue making D.C. safe and great again. Criminals should never feel more at home here in this city than the law-abiding residents and visitors and leaders from all over the country, and in fact all over the world, who come to visit this city. The days of letting the left's failed policies destroy great American cities is over. And again, I want to thank my colleagues for their hard work, especially that of Harriet Hageman on the Article 1 Task Force. I now turn it over to my good friend from South Carolina, Mr. William Timmons.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I got back here on Sunday, and I got to tell you, the difference is truly incredible. I've been working for the last 6.5 years to try to keep this city what I know it can be, to work with the mayor, the city council, the chief of police, to help people that need help. Thousands of homeless people in our nation's capital. It has just ripped me apart. It is so sad to see people suffering. We need to help these people. And it's even more sad to see the people victimized by violent crime, whether they're killed, carjacked. I've seen members of Congress that have been mugged. We've had staff that have been killed. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. President Trump has saved our nation's capital. I've said for the last 6.5 years that a nation's capital in decline represents a nation in decline. We are not in decline. There's a new day in this country, and there's a new day for American leadership in the world, and our capital needs to show that. So thousands of homeless people that put up tents all over this city are now getting help that they need. They're getting food, they're getting showers, they're getting mental health counseling, they're getting drug counseling. And guess what? The criminals know for the first time in decades that if they commit a crime, there will be consequences. Walking around yesterday all over the city and seeing our soldiers from all over the country here keeping us safe. And guess what? They haven't had to do much in terms of law enforcement. They haven't had to protect anybody because deterrent threats matter. And having soldiers that are walking around, criminals know that they're going to be caught. They're going to be held accountable. And they know that this president is not going to let them out tomorrow. That's what we need. That's what we have needed for so long. And I couldn't be more excited for the Washington, D.C. that I see today. And Congress has a huge role to play in this. We must pass laws to further appropriate funds, to beautify the city, to make every American proud of this city, to make sure that every American can come here and not be worried about being mugged. For the last 6.5 years, I have told people that this is not a safe place and you should not walk around at night. That makes me so unhappy when I have to do that. Not anymore. Not anymore. I am so excited that President Trump has taken these steps, and Congress must now act. We're going to pass a number of additional laws to make sure that we never find ourselves in this situation again. And we're going to give not only the funding they have asked for, we're going to give them much more than the funding they asked for to make this city exactly what it should be. It should represent the greatest country in the history of human civilization, and people should be safe and very excited to come here. That's what we're going to do. I thank Harriet Hageman for her leadership and August Pfluger for his. It's a new day in this city. It's a new day in our country. It's a new day for leadership in the world. And we're going to do everything we can to help President Trump keep us on the right track. And with that, I turn it over to Representative Brad Knott. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Timmons. My name is Brad Knott. I'm from North Carolina, and before my time in Congress just a short while ago, I was a federal prosecutor. I investigated violent criminals, I investigated cartels, I investigated human traffickers, wherever they were all over this country. And it became very clear to me when I was working with law enforcement that if you don't fight crime, if you don't attack it, if you don't work hard for long sentences, crime will flourish. And that's exactly what we've seen here in Washington, D.C. for the last couple of years. And from my time as a federal prosecutor, I know some of the federal agents who have been called to serve in Washington as part of the president's initiative. And since their arrival, I have been astounded as I have stayed in touch with them at the amount of contraband, the number of dangerous people, whether it's drugs, whether it's gangs, whether it's illegal firearms, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's South American cartels, you name it, it is right here in Washington, D.C. The soft on crime policies of the Democrats has unfortunately allowed crime to spiral out of control, whether in D.C. or elsewhere around the country. Unfortunately, we are seeing the Democratic Party and the far left portions of this country protect the criminals rather than backing law enforcement. We've seen city after city spiral out of control and decay right in front of our eyes, including Washington, D.C. I applaud the president for saying the simple truth. It does not have to be this way. It does not have to be this way. And regardless of who you are, when you come to Washington, it's a safe city now. Businesses are thankful. Families are thankful. Citizens, tourists, we are all thankful. It's time to stop turning a blind eye for crime wherever it is. Wherever it is, we must investigate, we must prosecute, and we must protect the law-abiding citizens of this country. Thank you, and with that, I turn it over to Representative Laurel Lee.
And you were just watching Republican lawmakers touting President Trump's cleanup efforts of crime in Washington, D.C., saying that it has had a dramatic impact through efforts such as federalizing the D.C. police force and as well as the deployment of National Guard troops. Joining us now to discuss President Trump's executive order now to eliminate no cash bail is John Kofos, a nationally recognized advocate for criminal justice reform who has worked with multiple presidential administrations and governors. Previously, John was a criminal lawyer until he was convicted for drunk driving. After getting out of prison, he helped to create the New Jersey Reentry Corps, which helps remove barriers to employment for former inmates. First of all, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today, John. In your view, what is the impact? With you. Yes, hope you had a good holiday yesterday. What is the impact of cashless bail on public safety in your view?
Sure. So great question. So cashless bail, as it was done in, say, places like New York City, have been an absolute disaster. So what happens is the right system is a system like our feds have, right? The federal government has a system where they do a risk assessment, and cash bail is one of the many options that you can be given for release, along with conditions or detention, which is really important. Our cashless bail jurisdictions that haven't done this right, like New York, have essentially let people out without any money bail, but also no risk assessment. So then you just get out. It's a very, very dangerous and foolish system, and kind of unique to just a few places in this country.
Okay, let's compare cash bail versus cashless bail. Does cash bail deter more criminals when compared to cash bail in your view?
So the data's split on that. And I think the key is a danger-based system. So I'll give you a really good example, right? So when I practiced law, I did a lot of gang and organized crime cases during the time in New Jersey when we had cash bail and only cash bail. We couldn't detain anybody. So what happens is my clients could make any bail you gave them. 500,000, a million, 5 million, it didn't matter. And then they went and terrorized witnesses. New Jersey changed the system to look like a federal system with detention. So the issue here is not strictly cash versus cashless. It's risk versus no risk. And risk really breaks into two categories: dangerous people and dangerous offenses. And I think we need a system that accommodates for dangerous people and dangerous offenses, that permits a great variety of options for bail, including, in some cases, money bail.
So what does the evidence show about the relationship between crime rates and the type of bail, for example, cash versus risk-based?
Sure. So in places like New Jersey, for example, New Jersey is a state that implemented that risk-based federal system. New Jersey didn't have the crime spikes that much of the country did, even during the summers of 2020 and places and things of that nature. Other places like New York, for example, or Philadelphia, where they actually have cash bail, but then don't ask for it for a great majority of the people, are just letting people out, so the crime rate's spiking. So now take the District of Columbia, which traditionally does not have a cash bail system. But the problem is there's not a robust detention system. And there's one other factor here that people aren't talking about, which is going to be very uncomfortable for people to confront, which is the juvenile crime epidemic. Juveniles in every state in America and the federal system are subject to a different type of pretrial detention system through the family courts than adults. So what happens is whether you have cash or cashless bail, it doesn't affect the detention of a juvenile unless the juvenile is waived up to adult court. That is something this country is going to have to confront, as well as the illegal immigration issue as it relates to bail.
So when talking about risk-based bail system, I want to know how exactly, specifically, is risk assessed?
Sure. First thing is your criminal record, right? Well, actually, let me go back. The first thing is the offense you've committed. Places like Texas have said you're automatically detained for certain types of offenses, the ones you'd expect, right? Murder or certain other heinous crimes. So the first thing is you always look at the offense. What did the person do? The next thing you do is look at their criminal record. And criminal record needs to look at two things: the violence in their history, or a person with repeated violations of law, even if nonviolent. Right. And it's that second part that too many of the criminal justice advocates have not appropriately accommodated for. Right. They assume, oh, if you've just shoplifted 40 times, it's a nonviolent crime, so let the person out. Well, that's not the way it should be. So the risk should be, first, what's the offense? Second, what's the person's record? Form a risk profile from there.
Is it appropriate to ask the question, how do we make sure that risk assessment methods are fair and consistent across the board?
Yeah, no, it's very fair. So the first thing is, the good news is offenses are offenses, right? The offenses really have no play in them except how they're charged, right? Then the issue is you'll get some advocates to say that areas that are over-policed will have people with more arrests and worse records. Well, maybe, but the idea here is the number of convictions we're talking about are what matters, because the idea, say someone's going through a mental health crisis, right? And they commit a series of public disorder offenses, but lots and lots and lots of them. If they won't stop, there's no point in just continuing to let them out. They have to be detained. And when they get detained, they have to be moved into treatment or just detained so they're specifically detained to not commit crimes. So I think the first equalizing factor is the offense itself. The second are the offense level of the person. New Jersey scores people, and then through a risk algorithm, and then what happens is a judge always gets the final say.
All right, John, President Trump is about to make announcements, so we'll leave the conversation here for today. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And President Trump is making an announcement in the Oval Office. We're going to tune into that.
It was 100, right?
100, and she loves you, Mr. President.
Well, and she was very proud of you.
Thank you very much.
Very, very proud of you. So thank you, Katie.
Wonderful woman.
She must have been. To produce you indirectly, I can tell you she had to be. Tommy Tuberville, who's a great coach. And I won't say anything about what happened with Alabama football this weekend.
Let's leave that out.
But you're not used to that, right? You're not used to that. But Tommy, Auburn won, that's right. They did. So you're happy. Tommy's been a great senator, as you know, and a fantastic guy all around. He was also a tremendous coach. House Armed Services Committee Chair Mike Rogers. Thank you, Mike. Where's Mike? Mike, thank you very much. Doing great, Mike. Representatives Barry Moore, all great friends, Robert Adderholt, Gary Palmer, and Dale Strong. Thank you all very much, fellas. Appreciate it. In my first term, I created a thing called Space Force, so important. You know, we were losing the race in space very badly to China and to Russia, and now we're far and away number one in space, and reestablished Space Com with a mission to protect American space assets and detect any threat to our homeland. We initially selected Huntsville for the Spacecom headquarters, yet those plans were wrongfully obstructed by the Biden administration. And as you know, they moved them to a different locale. And today we're moving forward with what we want to do and the place that we want to have this. And this will be there for hopefully hundreds of years. That's where it's going to be. I will say I want to thank Colorado. The problem I have with Colorado, one of the big problems, they do mail-in voting. They went to all mail-in voting. So they have automatically crooked elections. And we can't have that. When a state is for mail-in voting, that means they want dishonest elections because that's what that means. So that played a big factor also. In Huntsville, Spacecom will play a key role in building the Golden Dome, as you know. That's going to be a big thing. Everybody wants to be a participant in it. Missile Defense Shield, we're going to be having a Golden Dome that the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. The finest, the best. And by the way, Canada called. They want to be a part of it, and that'll be great. But Canada wants very much to be included in that, and we're going to work something out with them, I hope. It will also ensure that our technological capabilities, of which we're way ahead of anybody else, there's nobody close, remain unmatched long into the future. So I'd like to ask Secretary Hegseth to say a few words. He was very much a part of it. And really, everybody behind me was. Every one of these people would call me and lobby me. I said, Katie, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I know what you want. She said, that's right, sir. That's what I want. And they got their way. So I just want to congratulate. These are really special people. They're politicians in many ways, but they're great patriots, I think even more so than politicians. So they fought very hard to get it, and it's an honor to give it to Huntsville. Pete, say a few words, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. As usual, right place, right time, for the right reason. In your first administration, you established the Space Force at a time when we knew we had to be looking to that domain of space. You also reestablished Spacecom to ensure that priority was put in place, and you, through the Air Force, independently identified that Huntsville, Alabama was the right place to put it. For other reasons, in the next administration under Biden, they decided to move it somewhere else. Well, during that time, the DoD Inspector General, the Government Affairs Office, they did their own assessments, and where did they say Spacecom should go? Huntsville, Alabama. So what you're doing today, Mr. President, is restoring it to precisely where it should be based on what the Space Force, the Air Force, your leadership believes will give us strategic advantage in the future. That is Huntsville, Alabama. We are way ahead in space, but this will ensure we stay leaps and bounds ahead because that's the most important domain. Whoever controls the skies will control the future of warfare. And Mr. President, today you're ensuring that happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Katie, would you like to say something?
Mr. President, we are grateful for your leadership on this and restoring Space Command to its rightful home in Huntsville, Alabama. This delegation has worked together, both chambers, both parties, to make sure that Huntsville was the place that Space Command called home. As was mentioned, obviously the Biden administration chose to make this political. What we want to do is put the safety and security of Americans first. We want to make sure that our warfighter is put first, and we want to make sure that America continues to lead. And today, Mr. President, you've allowed that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tommy, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. This is a great day for our country, not just for our state of Alabama. We need help in our military. We need to catch up. And as Secretary has said, we're not behind in space, but we know where we're at, and we need to expound on that. Now, this move will save the taxpayers $480 million. It's not going to cost more. It's going to cut $480 million. We have the plans intact. It'll be behind a secure wall in Huntsville, Alabama, at Redstone Arsenal. We have 40,000 people there. We have the FBI there. We have missile defense there. We have NASA, Blue Origin, and SpaceX. It is the perfect place for Space Command. I would tell you today, and I've spoke with the President for the last 3 or 4 years about this, if I thought it needed to go somewhere else because I understand the security of our country, I'd be for that. But the best place for Space Command is Huntsville, Alabama, because what we have and what it means to this country is going to be so important. So thank you, Mr. President, for this, and we look forward to building a huge Space Command and having the Donald J. Trump Space Command Center in Huntsville, Alabama.
Absolutely.
Sure. Well, Mr. President, thank you. I'll be very brief here. I lobbied the president hard to put it in Ohio, but he said these people behind us, these Alabamas, are just too powerful and too persuasive, and so it's in Alabama. But as Tommy said, this is exactly the right place for Space Force and Space Command. I think Americans ought to appreciate the fact that you can't win the battle of the future unless you control the skies. The cyber security, the communications, the entire infrastructure of the battle in the 21st century will be in space. So it was a visionary move in the first administration for the president to set up Space Force, and I think an equally visionary move to make sure that Space Force is right where it should be in Huntsville, Alabama. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, anybody want to say anything? Would you like to say?
Mr. President, another promise made, another promise kept. You think about it, Redstone Arsenal is critical to national security. The president said when you were the 45th president, let's do what's right for national security. And today, that's exactly what we're doing. It's not because of this or that. It's because it's right for national security. You think of the 21 categories that were evaluated to determine what was best for national security. All indicators pointed back to Huntsville, Alabama, and Redstone Arsenal. We have the right people at the right place at the right time. Mr. President, on behalf of the people of the 5th Congressional District and all of Alabama, thank you for keeping your word. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Anybody?
Let me just say, Mr. President, I want to say thank you. And thank you for doing this because it was the right thing to do. When they looked at all the numbers, Huntsville was the place to go, and like you say, it was unfortunately pulled out, but you made it right. So I want to just say thank you again for a grateful nation, and to the state of Alabama, we're very grateful. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Throughout history, militaries has always understood that whoever could hold the high ground held the advantage. Space is the ultimate high ground. And what we're doing with moving the Space Command to Huntsville is absolutely critical to our maintaining dominance in that sphere. And it goes hand in hand with what we're trying to do with the Golden Dome and missile defense, to defend against anyone else who tries to enter that sphere. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. And obviously, national defense is a huge issue. And when you look at the scores, Alabama was #1. And for political reasons, it was moved out of our state. But, Mr. President, thank you for making priorities the defense and the warfighter and the safety of this nation. And in the big, beautiful bill, that Golden Dome will be built in Huntsville, Alabama, and we're grateful for that. Thank you.
Listen, as chairman of the Armed Services Committee, I care very much about what's most important for our national security. And the president held a nationwide competition to determine where we should have this command. If y'all remember, at the end of that competition, where Alabama came in first, there was a lot of complaints from the other states who did not place well. He said, we'll do it over with new criteria to accommodate your concerns. Alabama came in first in that second competition. His Secretary of the Air Force reviewed the results, said it was fair, and the President named Huntsville. It was the Biden administration that decided to make it political, even though his own Secretary of the Air Force said it was a fair competition and it should be in Huntsville. So I want you to know I appreciate this President standing up and being strong and saying he's going to make this right and put it where it rightfully belongs, and that's Huntsville, Alabama.
Thank you very much. Good job. So thank you all very much. You are going to leave me alone now. You're not going to call me anymore and talk about this subject, right? You promise? They'll start something else. But I just want to congratulate you. It's a very big deal. When you come out and when you leave the room, you'll see that we just, over the last few minutes, literally shot out a boat, a drug-carrying boat, a lot of drugs in that boat. And you'll be seeing that and you'll be reading about that. It just happened moments ago. And our great general, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's been so incredible, including what took place in Iran, knocking out potential nuclear power for a long time to come. I think within a month they would have had it if we didn't do what we did. But he gave us a little bit of a briefing, and you'll see. And there's more where that came from. We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country, coming in for a long time. And we just, these came out of Venezuela and coming out very heavily from Venezuela. A lot of things are coming out of Venezuela. So we took it out, and you'll get to see that after this meeting is over. Do you have any questions, please? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Cumberville talked about the cost savings
Yeah.
associated with this announcement. Can you talk about the strategic benefits by having Space Force Command headquartered in Huntsville?
Well, it just works because we have so much else there. And having a central, you could call it a central command, but it really is a command station. Also, even locationally, where it is, and when you think about flying distances, if you can save a half an hour as fast as some of these planes go and things go, and even the rockets go, if you can save by having the best location. So we went out, as you know, to experts, and we had 4 different groups of experts. They all said this was the best location. I also loved it from the standpoint, I know the people of Alabama, they are great people, work hard, and there's no games, and they're very proud of it. And I would say they fought harder for it than anybody else also. A lot of states, 5 states really wanted it, but they wanted it more. And I kid you not when I say that these people, they spoke to me a lot. That's all they wanted to talk about. They didn't want to talk about the weather. They only wanted to talk about moving to this location, moving to Alabama, Huntsville in particular. So we're honored to do it. They really wanted it badly, and they got it. Peter?
President Trump, something completely different, but about a big viral social media trend over the weekend. How did you find out over the weekend that you were dead? You see that?
No.
People didn't see you for a couple days. 1.3 million user engagements as of Saturday morning about your demise.
Really? I didn't see that. You know, I have heard, it's sort of crazy, but last week I did numerous news conferences, all successful. They went very well, like this is going very well. And then I didn't do any for 2 days, and they said, there must be something wrong with him. Biden wouldn't do them for months. You wouldn't see him. And nobody ever said there was ever anything wrong with him, and we know he wasn't in the greatest of shape. No, I heard that. I get reports. Now, you knew I did an interview that lasted for about an hour and a half with somebody, and everybody saw that was on one of your competitors. I did numerous shows and also did a number of truths, long truths, and I think pretty poignant truths. No, I was very active over the weekend. They also knew I went out to visit some people at the club that I own, pretty nearby on the Potomac River. And no, I've been very active actually over the weekend. I didn't hear that one. That's pretty serious stuff. Well, it's fake news. You know, it's just it's so fake. That's why the media has so little credibility. I knew they were saying, like, is he okay? How's he feeling? What's wrong? I said, I just left. And it's also sort of a longer weekend, you know, it's Labor Day weekend. So I would say a lot of people know. I was very active this Labor Day. I had heard that, but I didn't hear it to that extent. Go ahead, Peter.
We know that this country has a huge problem with school shootings. You've said that you're open to sending the National Guard pretty much anywhere. Would you ever consider sending an armed National Guardsman to every school?
Well, we have a big problem with school shooting, but we also have thousands and thousands of schools that run perfectly. You know, they talk about you can do things construction-wise, and that's really, I think nobody knows more about construction than me. You can build the construction doors. You can build what they call safety doors, where they lock on the outside, the inside, and every place else. Well, but if one of these lunatics happens to get through, then the police can't get in. Then they're looking for keys all over the place, and it takes a lot of disadvantages to doing, you know, spending billions and billions of dollars and actually making it safer in some way for some of these lunatics that we're dealing with. But I don't think so. I've thrown out the concept. We have great teachers that love our children. The parents love the children. Teachers love the children too. And if you took a small percentage of those teachers that were in the military, that were distinguished in the military, that were in the National Guard, et cetera, and you let them carry, that's something that a lot of people like. I sort of liked it. It'd have to be studied, but they're trained. They know about weapons. You can't do it with every teacher because most teachers don't know, and you know. But I always thought that would be an alternative. But it just we've had a lot of instances. Other countries have also. They have different kinds of problems than we have, but we do have. There's something going on. And it's a bad thing. Yes, please.
Have you spoken with President Putin in the past week? Have you spoken with President Putin in the past week?
Yeah, I don't want to. I have learned things that will be very interesting. I think in the next few days you'll find out.
Consequences if there isn't some type of announcement of a meeting with President Putin and President Zelensky? And what could those consequences be?
We're going to see what happens. We're going to see what they do and what happens. I'm watching it very closely. Last week, they lost 7,000, between the two countries, 7,313 soldiers, to be somewhat exact, for no reason whatsoever. And they're Russian and they're Ukrainian, but, you know, they're soldiers. I want to see it end. Yeah.
Mr. President, have you decided you're definitely going to send National Guard troops to Chicago?
I didn't say when, but the answer is, look, Chicago's very interesting because I watched Pritzker get up and say about, we don't need help, we're safe. But 2 weeks ago, they had 6 people murdered, and they had 24 people hit by bullets. Last week, as you know, it was 7 people, 24 people hit, and 7 people died. And then over the last 2 days, that was the crown jewel. They had, I guess, 9 or 10 killed, and 50 hit with bullets. And you have this governor get up, who's a terrible governor. Probably he and Gavin Newsom would be probably the 2 worst and most naive. They're naive. Either they're naive or they're very untruthful. And he'll say, we don't want any protection. We don't need. So in the last 3 weeks, he's lost almost 20 people killed. There's no place in the world, including you can go to Afghanistan, you can go to places that you would think of. They don't even come close to this. Chicago is a hellhole right now. Baltimore is a hellhole right now. Parts of Los Angeles are terrible. If we didn't put out the fires, and I mean the other fires, the bullet fires, they didn't do a good job with, they should have had the water coming down, like I said. You know, we had to release the water. We had to go in and release the water to LA. It's so badly run. But if I didn't send the National Guard into Los Angeles, I would be making an announcement today. I'd be talking about Huntsville, and I'd simultaneously be saying, by the way, the Olympics is not coming to Los Angeles. If we didn't do that, and even the sheriff, the top law enforcement person in Los Angeles said, we could not have handled it without them. So that's what he said.
Have you made your mind up on Chicago, though?
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. When you lose, look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation. When when 20 people are killed over the last 2.5 weeks, and 75 are shot with bullets. So let me tell you a little story about a place called D.C., District of Columbia, right here where we are. It's now a safe zone. We have no crime. It's in such great shape. You can go and actually walk with your children, your wife, your husband. You can walk right down the middle of the street. You're not going to be shot, Peter. You're safe. Everyone likes you anyway. They probably wouldn't do it. But it's so dangerous. And there are people in this audience that you've suffered greatly. There are people in this audience that have been mugged and hurt badly, and they don't want to talk about it. Maybe you were very brave in talking about it. You made quite an impression on a lot of people. I appreciate it. But there were other people in this room that have been hurt very badly just walking down the street in D.C. Washington, D.C. is a safe zone right now. It's a safe city. The restaurants are open. They're booming. You can't get a restaurant. New restaurants are announcing that they're going to be open. This took place in 12 days. Now it's 15 days, but 3 days ago it became what's known as a safe zone. It's a safe city. And this city was really bad, really, really bad. We took 1,600 people out, hardcore criminals that will not be coming back anytime soon. And we're very proud of it. You know, to have our nation's capital lose every week. You know, it was like years, many years, where every single week somebody was killed for many, many, many consecutive weeks. This went on for years. And then we had, last week it was announced that nobody was killed last week. And I made that announcement in front of a very distinguished leader of a country. And I'm saying proudly, ladies and gentlemen, nobody was killed in Washington, D.C. this week. He looked at me like, what's that all about? I say, yeah, we have a little bit of a crime problem. And we don't have a crime problem in Washington anymore. And the mayor has been very helpful, and the police commission has been very helpful, and it's been a great team. And I would love to have Governor Pritzker call me. I'd gain respect for him and say, we do have a problem, and we'd love you to send in the troops, because you know what? The people, they have to be protected. I saw today on one of your networks, not a friendly network, except really the opposite, I would say, very unfriendly network. And they interviewed about 12 people on this morning. Most of them were African American, they were black. And they were saying, please, please, please let the president send in. These were people from Chicago. Please, we need help. We need help. We can't walk outside, we're petrified. If the governor of Illinois would call me up, I would love to do it. Now, we're going to do it anyway. We have the right to do it because I have an obligation to protect this country. And that includes Baltimore. I saw where Governor Moore was asking me to take a walk down the street of Baltimore. Well, Baltimore is a very unsafe place. It's rated number 4 in the city, one of the most unsafe places anywhere in the world. But, you know, we took care. This was a beautiful thing that happened in Washington because we showed that it could be done. And this wasn't just sending big, strong guys, and they are big and they are strong. You know, we had a great decision from the Supreme Court that had to do with sort of talent. It had to do with you are put down based on merit. You can hire based on merit. So merit for a soldier or for a policeman is strong, physically fit, having a certain ability, not a person that is woke and got the job through woke, but wasn't strong enough to lift a gun out of the holster, et cetera, et cetera. No, I looked at the police. As you know, last week I went over, we had a meeting there had to be 300 people, and they were all very impressive looking. And when the bad guys see them, they're not going to do a thing. And so I'm very proud of Washington. It serves as a template, and we're going to do it elsewhere. But Chicago is certainly going to be high. I would love to have him call. I would love the governor of Illinois. I'd be honored to take his call. All he has to do is say, sir, we need help. It's out of control. And everyone knows it is. He's not kidding anyone. I would love to have, I would say, Governor Moore call, because I watched him over the weekend trying to explain that Baltimore, what they need is housing. No, they don't need housing. They need to get rid of the criminals. These are hardcore criminals. You know, we took many people off the streets of Washington, D.C. They're hardcore. They're not going to be good. In 10 years, in 20 years, in 2 years, they're going to be criminals. They were born to be criminals, frankly. They were born to be criminals, and they're tough and mean, and they'll cut your throat, and they won't even think about it the next day. They won't even remember that they did it. And we're not going to have those people. Washington, D.C. is now a safe zone. It's a safe place, and you can walk, Katie, you can walk right down the street with, by the way, one of the biggest human beings I've ever seen, which is her husband. He was a football player for like 11 years in the NFL. He's a big person. But big doesn't mean anything when they have guns and when they have knives and everything else that they have, right? But you can walk right down the street, even by yourself, and you're totally safe. Washington, D.C. is a great thing. Yes, ma'am, please.
Calling on Democratic leaders across the country to work with you on crime. Do you see your efforts here in D.C., including, for example, working with Mayor Bowser here as a model for bringing more bipartisanship in matters not only with crime, but also issues that matter to everyday American people's lives?
So Mayor Bowser's been great. She could have taken the thing, oh, well, and then after I clean it up, they'll take credit for it. You know what they do is they take credit. Like, we cleaned up Los Angeles. We did a great job there. And it was overwhelming what was going on. And again, the police chief made a statement that we could not have done, there's no way they could handle it. You saw what was happening out there. It was going to be a disaster. We stopped it cold. If we didn't do that, it would have been a very sad day. And you know, remember, we have the Olympics, we have the World Cup, we have all these things coming, and we have 250, all of these things coming. But I watched Newsroom get up and say he's doing a great. He's not. We're the ones that did it, and that's okay. Whatever it takes. But the main thing is we. But he got up and said we did it. Well, he didn't want us there, and he's going to need us again because it's starting to form again. I see it. It's starting to form again. You know, we have to maintain. It's like maintenance on an airplane. You can buy it, but you have to maintain it. And if you don't maintain it, a good plane becomes very unsafe very quickly. So. It's an honor to do it. A lot of presidents wouldn't do what I'm doing. I don't need this heat. But when I watched television last night and I'm watching the news and I see that 9 people were killed in Chicago and 54 were badly wounded with bullets, I say, that's not this country. We have to do something. And I do say this. I say this very much. I'm not speaking to anybody but them right now. I would love to receive calls from governors and mayors saying they need help. We'll help them. We have a lot of people. We have a great force. We have a great military force. You know, Pete will tell you that when I was running for office, and this was a big headline, I think, you know, probably got me a couple of votes, but you couldn't sign people in the military. Nobody wanted to join the military, the Army, Air Force, the Navy, Marines, Space Force, Coast Guard. We never forget Coast Guard because they've done such a great job. Never. But nobody wanted to join any of them. We were way below what we wanted. Every single one. The closest was the Marines, whatever that is. You'll explain that to me. But the closest was the Marines. But every service was way down, way down. And then I got elected, and our country is the hottest country anywhere in the world right now. Everybody's talking about the USA. They're talking about the job that we're doing. Everybody. We have the best economy. We have a very, very important decision being made by the Supreme Court because our country is the richest, the strongest, the most powerful. But if for some reason some liberal court, I'm talking about the court that just ruled, where even an Obama judge voted in favor of us, which I gave him a compliment yesterday, as you know. I said that took great courage. But it's a liberal court, and it's going up to the Supreme Court, who I think have been incredible people. I think they've made very wise decisions. But the tariff question, because without the tariffs, this country is in serious, serious trouble. We've taken in almost $17 trillion of investment is coming in. Most of it is coming because of tariffs. And if for some reason somebody wanted to be politically correct, I actually think it's unpolitically correct. I think politically correct is to approve it, because there's nothing so popular as what's happened to our country. Our country is doing so well. But we had a liberal court gave us a very shocking ruling, and that ruling is basically saying that the trillions of dollars that are pouring into our country, putting us in a position like no country is anywhere in the world, that they'd like to see us that taken away. By the way, a lot of the people behind that lawsuit, that particular, are from foreign countries, I might add.
There's a video that is circulating online now of the White House where a window is open to the residents upstairs and somebody is throwing a big bag out the window. Have you seen this?
No, that's probably AI generated.
So
Actually, you can't open the windows. You know why? They're all heavily armored and bulletproof.
So that's a fake video?
Well, it's got to be, because I know every window up there. The last place I'd be doing it is that, because there's cameras all over the place, right? Including yours. No, but every window, I've never seen a window that's, in fact, my wife was complaining about it the other day. She said, love to have a little fresh air come in, but you can't. They're bulletproof. And number one, they're sealed. And number two, each window weighs about 600 pounds. You have to be pretty strong to open them up. No, that has to be, where was the window? Let me see.
Maybe from the renovations.
Which is the window?
It looks like this is on the 15th Street side, I think. Yeah. So right here.
Yeah, those windows are sealed. Those windows are they're all sealed. You can't open them.
What you were saying regarding the federal.
It's the kind of thing they do. And one of the problems we have with AI, it's both good and bad. If something happens really bad, just blame AI. But also they create things, you know, it works both ways. If something happens that's really bad, maybe I'll have to just blame AI. But there's truth to it, because I see so many phony things. I saw something as I was growing up, from the time I was a baby till now. I said, who did that? It was AI generated. So it's a little bit scary, to be honest with you. But those windows are all very heavily sealed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to follow up with what you were saying regarding that federal appellate court that ruled against you and your administration as it relates to your ability.
Well, they ruled against our country, the court, and they ruled against us before. It's a very liberal court.
You called it highly partisan in your
Well, it
social
certainly
media
is. It certainly
and
is.
in fact, it was along ideological lines, 7-4.
Well, except that we actually got one of the Obama judges that was appointed by President Obama voted in favor of the tariffs, because he felt it was imperative for our country to thrive and survive even. And I gave him credit. I said, you know what? That took a lot of courage for him to do it, because you don't see that often.
So my question is, I suspect you're going to appeal that all the way to the Supreme Court.
Well, we already have, yeah. In fact, we're doing something else. We're going to be going to the Supreme Court, we think, tomorrow, because we need an early decision. I mean, look, the financial fabric of our country, we're a rich, incredible country right now, and we're able to, you know, other countries use tariffs on us for years, and we never did. I did a lot during my first term, but then we had COVID and we had to focus on other things. You couldn't be tariffing Italy, Spain, France, as they were dying by the thousands and millions. But we did with China, and China paid us billions and billions of dollars. And I started the process, but then I had to end it a little bit because of COVID. We focused on that. But no, it's a very important decision. And frankly, if they make the wrong decision, it would be a devastation for our country. We've taken in trillions of dollars. And by the way, all these countries signed agreements, as an example. They're all happy. Everybody's happy. But some whack job put in a lawsuit. It went before a very liberal court, and the liberal court ruled, it was 11, they ruled 7-4, with one of the most liberal of them all voting in our favor, because they're patriots. I think I give tremendous credit to that judge, and now it's going to the Supreme Court. Now we're going to be asking for early admittance. We're going tomorrow, and we're going to ask for an expedited ruling, because, you know, when you look at the stock market's down today, the stock market's down because of that, because the stock market needs the tariffs. They want the tariffs. If you look at AI, all of those, you know, all of that money that's going to be invested, trillions and trillions of dollars, the biggest thing, bigger than the internet, I suspect. It's the internet plus 3 or 4 other things combined. We are leading very substantially with AI. We're leading because of tariffs. We're leading because of talent, and this is where they'd like to be. But without the tariffs, we wouldn't have a chance, because we wouldn't be able to protect those investments of the companies coming in. So if you took away tariffs, we could end up being a third world country. That's how big the ruling. So we're asking for an expedited ruling.
As a backstop to that, President, you have a Republican-controlled Congress. You control the House. You control the Senate.
Yeah, but we don't have 60 votes. We don't have 60 votes. I'd love to do that. Oh, if we had 60 senators, if we got the 60 votes, we would get them. But we need 60 votes, and we need, a certain number in the House. I think we'd get, I don't know, we have about 5 of them here. Would everybody agree with me on tariffs? Without tariffs, we're a different country. We have taken in so much money. And here's the thing. We signed a deal with Japan. They're paying us hundreds of billions of dollars. We signed a deal with South Korea. We signed a deal with the European Union. We signed a deal with Europe. And those countries are paying us $950 billion, and they're happy about it. They're okay. As one of them said, it's amazing that we got away with it so long. One of my friends, a leader of one of the countries, and they're fine with it. They all signed. If that ruling ever went against us, I guess we'd have to give back hundreds of billions. We would have to give trillions and trillions of dollars back to countries that have been ripping us off for the last 35 years. And I can't imagine it happening. On a legal basis, they have no legal basis whatsoever. But on a common sense basis, it would destroy America. Okay.
We talked about controlling the sky. On Sunday, the satellite signal of Ursula von der Leyen's plane was alleged.
With Ursula? Well, she had an interesting event. She's a tremendous woman. And so what are you asking me about her?
NATO is concerned about it, I do too, about this.
Sure, NATO is concerned about it. Well, nobody knows where it came from, but they did take away her ability to use a phone. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that could happen to me. I'd be very happy.
Mr. President, reducing the tariffs on India from 50%.
What does that mean?
Are you considering taking away some of the tariffs that you've imposed on India?
No, we get along with India very well. But India has, you have to understand, for many years it was a one-sided relationship. Only now since I came along, and because of the power that we have with tariffs, India was charging us tremendous tariffs, about the highest in the world. They were about the highest in the world, number one. And we therefore weren't doing much business with India, but they were doing business with us because we weren't charging them. Foolishly, we weren't charging them. So they would send in massive, everything they made, they'd send it in, pour it into our country. Therefore, it wouldn't be made here, which is a negative. But we would not send in anything because they were charging us 100% tariffs. And, I'll give you an example, Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson couldn't sell into India. There was a 200% tariff on a motorcycle. So what happens? Harley Davidson went to India and built a motorcycle plant. And now they don't have to pay tariffs. Same thing as us. So what we're doing is literally thousands of companies are coming into the U.S., car companies, AI, but, more traditionally, car companies. We have so many car company factories under construction or being designed right now. And they're coming from China, they're coming from Mexico, I must tell you, and they're coming from Canada, a lot of them coming from Canada. But they're coming into our country because they want to build here. And they want to build here for two reasons. Number one, they'd like to be here. And number two, the tariffs are protecting them. And number three, they want to avoid paying tariffs. When they build their cars here, they don't have any tariffs to pay. When you build here, you don't have any tariffs.
Mr. President,
go ahead,
in light of the Minnesota shooting last week, the Department of Homeland Security is now awarding more than $100 million to hundreds of faith organizations across the country to help them ramp up security. What's your vision for further protecting religious liberty across the country amid incidents of threats?
So religious liberty is so important, and we're talking about every religion now, and we're doing things on that nobody else has ever done, and we're going to be having a big announcement in about 2 weeks on that question. Yeah, please.
On Space Command, sir, are you concerned that people may not be willing to relocate from Colorado to Alabama?
No, I'm not worried. We'll get somebody else. The problem with Colorado is they have a very corrupt voting system. I have so many friends in Colorado. Anytime you have mail-in voting, you have corrupt elections. Very simple. It's very simple. Even Jimmy Carter said it with his commission. They set up a commission with him and Scoop Jackson and some people, highly regarded people. And they said the finding was, if you have mail-in voting, you will have corrupt elections. Well, your radical left governor decided that he was going to have all mail-in voting in Colorado. Once you have all mail-in voting, and for whatever reason, the Democrats cheat. And they cheat like, they're not stupid. That's the only thing. They're no good on policy. They're no good on management. They're no good at government. But they're great at cheating. And they stick together, too. I give them credit for sticking together. Please.
Obviously, this is a big win for national security, moving this to Alabama. We've all can agree with that.
Big.
Is there any idea of the economic impact this has on the state and on that local area?
Katie, do you want to answer that?
Look, I mean, go ahead.
Please go.
This is going to be tremendous. I mean, the state of Alabama, what we've seen through this process is the worst of Washington. We've seen politics get in the way of what is best for the warfighter, what's best for national security. And the state of Alabama is about to show the country the best among us. So we know the economic impact is going to be tremendous. There at Redstone Arsenal, we're proud to house everything from the FBI to headquarters there for material command to a number of things. We obviously have NASA with Marshall Space Flight Center, and so this naturally fits within. When you look at the decision matrix that they placed in front of us, that's why we ranked so high, is because we have the resources necessary and the ability to build out quickly to meet the needs in front of us. As far as economic impact, it would be tremendous. Does anybody have an exact number? 1,600 jobs. With 3,000 spinoff. Look at this. This is teamwork right here. So we are really proud, and the people of Alabama are ready to get to work.
And I've got a housing question, if you could, just for a second, Mr.
Yeah,
President.
please.
Owning a home and going about the American dream seems like it's out of touch for a lot of Americans. Just recently, you pushed out a statement about addressing an emergency housing situation.
That's right. We're thinking about doing that.
Yeah, can you just...
Well, we need a little help from the Fed. We have a man named Jerome Too Late Powell. You probably heard of him. He's too late. He's way too late. And the economy is so strong that it's pushing through that. Normally, it would have been much tougher, but we're doing so well that we're pushing through it. But it makes it very hard for people to get mortgages because too late is too late. Very simple. He's too late. And probably political, whatever. He wasn't too late before the election. Before the election, he was cutting rates, right? Because he was hoping that, I guess, Biden would get in, or that Kamala would. He was a big Biden guy. Explain that one. And then he was a Kamala person, but he was hoping, I guess, she'd win. I guess. I don't know. It didn't work out too well. But yeah, we need a very serious cut. I think that if you look back many decades ago, the United States was always the lowest, even if they were doing badly. The United States was, because without the United States, everything in the world would die. It's true. It's so powerful. It's so big. And I made it really big in the first 4 years. Then it started to degenerate with what this Biden administration did. But we built it up to a level that I never thought we could be at this quickly. We're the hottest, we're the best financially. The money coming in is so big because of tariffs and other things, but because of tariffs. Tariff gets us even those other things. Plus, it gets us great negotiating. I settled 7 wars, and numerous of those wars were because of trade, and numerous of the trade deals that I made were because of tariffs. It gives you a great negotiating ability. If that ability were taken away from us by a liberal court acting on essentially foreign nations asking to get help from the United States government, when they've been doing this to us for 40 years, that's why we have $38 trillion in debt. We won't have it for long if they let us, if they allow us to do what everybody knows we should be able to do. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, another Biden-era action that you're now reversing is that you signed a deal last week to make federal buildings adopt and embrace classical architecture styles again. Can you talk to us about why you do that, and also what's your vision?
Well, we want to see beautiful buildings. Now, it's in the eye of the beholder. I've seen architectural reviews over the years. I'm an expert at it. I've gotten a lot of great reviews. But I've seen buildings that I didn't think were very good get great reviews, and I've seen great buildings get bad reviews. But it's just a standard. We want to have a good standard. We're building something here. For 150 years, they wanted a ballroom at the White House. We're doing something at the highest level, using great architects and all. And, it's very exciting. But we have a lot of interesting things happening architecturally in D.C. And D.C. is like a different place. And, you know, even the contractor said, sir, we walked down today, we feel like much safer. It's like a different place. Washington, D.C. is great. Now, we're going to also beautify it. We're going to put a topping on the roads. We're not going to rip them apart and take 4 years to build a road that was exactly the same by the time you build it. But we're going to put toppings. We're going to put new medians in. We're going to get the graffiti off. We're going to put tiles up in the tunnels where the tiles are missing. We'll do the whole tunnel instead of, you know, a little area where you see new tiles, old tiles that never look too good. But they could use it. You know, they've been up for 50 years. They've served their duty. But we're going to make this within about a 20-mile radius from the White House. We're going to have this place spick and span. It's going to be crime-free, and it's going to be spick and span. It's going to be, you'll be proud of Washington again. Go ahead, please.
Sir, China's having a massive military parade that President Putin and Kim Jong-un will be attending. Do you interpret that as a challenge to this? And are you concerned at all about those countries trying to be some sort of counterweight?
Not at all. China needs us, and I have a very good relationship with President Xi, as you know, but China needs us much more than we need them. No, I don't see that at all, no.
One more.
And I had actually a very good meeting with President Putin a couple of weeks ago. We'll see if anything comes out of it. If it doesn't, we'll take a different stance.
One March today in California ruled that your deployment of National Guard troops to Los Angeles was illegal. Do you have any response?
Well, it was a radical left judge. But very importantly, what did you not tell me in that question or statement that you made pretty much of a statement, I think?
Well, I was asking for your response.
No, you didn't say what the judge said, though. The judge said, but you can leave the 300 people that you already have in place. They can continue to be in place. That's all we need. But why didn't you put that as part of your statement? Because the same judge ruled exactly as you said, except the judge said that you could leave the 300 people that you already have in place. They can stay, they can remain, they can do what they have to do. Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And that was President Trump at the White House making an announcement to move the Space Force HQ to Huntsville, Alabama, saying that all the numbers point to Huntsville as the best place for the headquarters. That's including national security perspective. Meanwhile, China is hosting leaders from nations such as North Korea, Russia, and others this week. They're using the anniversary of the end of World War II to strengthen ties and possibly counter Western nations. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pavsdar has more.
The motorcade of North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un was seen in downtown Beijing on Tuesday. Also in China is Russian President Vladimir Putin. All three countries are being criticized by the West over their roles in the Ukraine war. China continues supporting Russia's economy, while North Korea has been sending troops to the front lines. In his opening remarks, Putin addressed Chinese leader Xi Jinping as a dear friend, while praising the strong relation Russia has been building with China.
Dear friend, both I and the entire Russian delegation are pleased to meet once again. Our close communication reflects the strategic nature of Russia-China relations, which are at an unprecedentedly high level.
Xi recently set out a vision for a new global security and economic order. He challenged the US and the West and called for a closer cooperation among non-Western leaders. And also on Tuesday, Russia and China agreed to build a new pipeline called the Power of Siberia 2. This comes despite US sanctions on China for doing business with Russia, thus funding the Ukraine war. The Oxford Institute for Energy Studies says the message is China is no longer even pretending to comply with US sanctions or care about what the West thinks. However, so far it's only an agreement. Much remains unclear, such as pricing, building and timeframes, none of which were announced. And at least one top Russian executive says China is actually moving towards energy independence. Arian Pavsdar, NTD News.
And President Trump said he has been watching the situation closely to see what would come out next. In a radio interview earlier, President Trump said he's, quote, very disappointed in Russian President Vladimir Putin That's because Russia hasn't followed through on promises made during their summit in Alaska 2 weeks ago. Instead, attacks on Ukraine have been increasing again. Now, the USS Missouri event in Honolulu today is commemorating the 80th anniversary of the signing that ended World War II. Joining us now to discuss is Jane Hampton Cook, presidential historian and award-winning author of 18 books. So Jane, thank you for staying with us. Can you walk us through the historical significance, of holding the commemoration on the deck of the USS Missouri?
Well, President Truman at the time said we will never forget Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese military leaders would never forget the USS Missouri. And that's because that is where the official surrender took place between the Allies and Japan. And we came in, the Americans came in, and not only were we, had we defeated them militarily, but we helped them get into a new phase of life. We turned Japan back to its people in 1952, and we helped them develop a democracy. We helped them have representative government. And so that's the difference. We didn't hold on to Japan as a power. We trained them and helped them get back on their feet financially as well. And so I think that's what's exciting about a day like today, where we can see the big picture, and we can see that, capitalism and representative government came out of that horrible war.
So then, in your view, Jane, how do these memorials and commemorative events, how do they help Americans exactly understand the impact World War II had on our world?
Well, I think it reminds Americans that there was a time where Hitler was, a tyrant. And that's what I think these events do. They remind us of liberty over tyranny. And that's, a really important thing to remember. And so I think that that's one of the ways that we can think about days like today, where there's a commemoration, is that, we remember what it was once like. And I think that that's an important thing to remember every now and then when we get caught up in today's world. It's good to take a step back and look at the big picture.
Can you also speak to as well, Jane, in what ways did America's military and industry during World War II distinguish itself from other nations?
Well, we were such a larger country than most of the other nations. And so we went to work in the factories to build the weapons and the ammunitions. I mean, this affected my family. My grandparents in Arkansas left Little Rock, and then they moved to Seattle, where my grandfather, who was too old to be a soldier, he started working in a factory. And that's how they helped the war effort. And so it was really a collective effort for Americans at home and, of course, those deployed. So that's one way I think we were different. France isn't that large of a country, and those smaller countries that fell, they just didn't have the infrastructure that America had as being a large country with a big ocean in between.
So the U.S. is a global superpower. How did World War II pave the way for the United States to become that?
Well, we were a power, but we really weren't a superpower before World War II. And the effort that we put in to send troops to fight to end the tyranny of Hitler and all of those things put us into a position to be a superpower. And so militarily, we demonstrated our capabilities as a superpower during World War II. And then after the war, the way the war ended, the Cold War that came out of that, that's where we diplomatically and politically emerged as a superpower, was through, retraining people, for example, in Japan, reorganizing their government and making it a representative government. That was the heft that we had after World War II, was not just military, but it was also politically and diplomatically.
And as well, Jane, I think one aspect that we have to mention here is, can you talk to us about the nuclear program, the U.S. nuclear program, and the role it played in the context of global power dynamics?
Well, sure. The nuclear capability changed everything, because the calculus became, does this country that we are working against or need to work with have nuclear weapons? And so that became the litmus test for everything. And that's why the Cold War proliferated, because Russia got the bomb and we had the bomb. And it's been a dance, really, to try to never get to the point where nuclear weapons are needed. And of course, that's the concern, right now with the conflict in Ukraine. We don't want to get to the point of escalation where nuclear weapons are used by us or by Russia. And so it's dictated really everything. It's a factors that you just can't ignore.
And what about American wartime alliances? How have they evolved since World War II?
I think this is fascinating because we were allied with China. We were allied with Russia as the Soviet Union during World War II. And today we see those countries as in an adversarial role quite often. But now we are allied with Japan, when Japan was our mutual enemy with China during World War II. And so the alliances have shifted around and moved, and it's dependent on economics and military and politics. But that's what I think is really fascinating, is that some of those alliances have flipped over the years because of the changes in the different countries that came out of World War II.
Right, that is interesting to think about. What are your thoughts on how did the war transform the United States domestic politics?
Well, what's interesting is that this was a big switch back to the way it had been. Before World War II and really before the Great Depression, we'd seesawed back and forth between Republican and Democrat when it came to the presidency. But Franklin Roosevelt, because of the Depression, became president, and he won 4 terms, which had never been done before. And the Democrats controlled the presidency for 14 years. And so after World War II, with the election of the former commander of the Supreme Allied Commander, Dwight Eisenhower, he became president as a Republican. And that election shifted us back to that pattern of Republican for president, Democrat for president. And we've kind of seesawed since then. But during World War II, it was all led by a Democratic president.
And just finally, Jane, can you give us your thoughts, your take as well on how did the U.S. post-war strategy and policy contribute to it becoming a superpower?
Well, I think the fact that we reached out diplomatically to so many countries, that we were able to change our relationship with Japan, for example. We also implemented the CIA, and that we didn't have the CIA before World War II. And so that has changed the way we look at things. And that's, an agency that's been discussed a lot lately with the Trump administration. And so, we grew as a country, both physically and our capabilities militarily, but also took on this greater role of being a diplomat. I mean, look at what President Trump has done with the NATO alliance. He had a lot of them come visit him at the same time in the White House 2 weeks ago. And I think that just shows you the power of the United States in bringing those European leaders together to talk about what to do with Ukraine and the Russian war.
And I think the president would say that tariffs is one of those abilities that has made the U.S. So powerful, as we heard in that press briefing earlier. Well, Jane, that's our time today. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, a federal judge in San Francisco ruled today that it wasn't lawful for the president to use the National Guard to protect immigration agents from Los Angeles protesters. A Michigan home is listed as Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook's primary residence, but who lives there? A local reporter went to find out. We have those stories and more after the break.
Hi, my name is Brady. When I was born, my parents thought everything was okay. My mom and dad were so excited to take me home.
I still get goosebumps telling this story. Several days in, his skin started to become very cold and clammy. We noticed that he had become blue around his mouth, and something was just very off.
We packed out as fast as we could. Brady stopped breathing twice on the way to the pediatrician. And that was one of the #1 things that just haunts me to this day.
I was born with a congenital heart defect called aortic coarctation. If my parents waited just 1 more hour to drive me to the hospital, I would not be here today. But thanks to research funded by the American Heart Association, I had heart surgery that saved my life. But not every kid is as lucky as me, which is why we need your help. Just call the number on the screen or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help. Get people trained in CPR. Get more hospitals certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. And help fund the next medical breakthroughs to help save kids like me.
When you donate to the American Heart Association, you're helping save lives like my son. And now, my son is happy and healthy thanks to the support of people like you.
When you call with your $19 a month, you'll get this really cool t-shirt as a thank you. Many children die from congenital heart defects. I can't wait to grow up to become a heart surgeon and fix babies' hearts, but until then, I'll keep helping the American Heart Association. So please join me. Just call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org to become a monthly donor and help save lives.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
They're just young people, hungry, homeless, and vulnerable. Covenant House is helping young adults facing homelessness. We're providing safe shelter to thousands, but the need is overwhelming. Please call or go online now. With your gift of $19 a month, we'll send you this blanket as a reminder of the comfort your gift provides a young person tonight. You'll provide safe shelter, hot meals, and medical care. Call the number on your screen or go online to safeplacetosleep.org.
A federal judge in San Francisco today ruled the Trump administration violated federal law when it mobilized nearly 5,000 of California's National Guard troops to quell protesters in Los Angeles. NTD's Arlene Richards has the details.
In a lengthy opinion issued on Tuesday, U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer ruled the Trump administration illegally federalized members of the state National Guard in June to address violent protests against immigration agents and federal officials. A three-day trial that ended August 13th addressed the actions of the military after they were deployed. The administration mobilized troops to Los Angeles after protesters objected to immigration agents conducting arrests of illegal immigrants. Breyer said although the protests became violent, there was no rebellion. He concluded that no federal law gave the president the authority to take such action where local law enforcement was willing to act. The administration had argued that the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. It said in filings that due to the violent nature of the protests, including throwing rocks at agents and blocking them, the president must ensure federal personnel and facilities are protected. Breyer said local law enforcement was able to respond to the protests and enforce the law. He questioned whether or not the administration properly coordinated with state officials before the deployment. Troops remained active during the trial due to a federal appeals court unanimously ruling in July that the president's actions were likely lawful. The administration demobilized nearly all National Guard troops in July, with about 300 remaining. Breyer is permitting the guards to remain in place until 12 noon on September 12th. The Trump administration is expected to appeal the decision. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The Justice Department is suing Illinois for providing in-state tuition and scholarships for students in the U.S. illegally. The DOJ argues that the policies discriminate against American citizens. The department says institutions of higher education violate federal law by providing benefits to illegal aliens that are not offered to U.S. citizens. According to the complaint, quote, Illinois has an apparent desire to win a race to the bottom as the country's leading sanctuary state. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Illinois said, quote, this policy treats illegal aliens better than U.S. citizens living in other states. The U.S. Attorney said that such policies incentivize illegal immigration adding, quote, Illinois citizens deserve better. A new twist in the controversy over Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook's mortgage fraud accusations. Cook has been accused of setting her primary residence in Georgia and Michigan. A reporter with the Michigan Enjoyer went to the Ann Arbor home listed under Cook's name to see who was living there.
Hello? How you doing?
Okay, how are you?
I'm good. My name's Charlie. I'm a reporter. This house is in the news. I was wondering if Lisa Cook lives here, or do you rent?
No, we're just waiting for this. We'll have to.
I'm sorry?
We'll have to talk to you.
Reporter Charlie LaDuff shared this video of him speaking to a person at a home Cook has listed as her primary residence. This comes as the Supreme Court is trying to decide whether President Trump's firing of her was legal. That move made President Trump the first American president to try to remove a governor from the Federal Reserve. At the same time, a federal judge is trying to decide if Cook can stay on the job until the justices decide. Hundreds of economists have signed an open letter to the president over his attempt to fire Cook. They claim this threatens the central bank's independence and erodes trust. The Senate is back in session, and their first order of business is the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026. Our Washington correspondent breaks down the most significant provisions on this important legislation.
As veterans commemorate the official surrender of the Empire of Japan and the end of World War II, lawmakers begin consideration of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026, a legislation with a focus on being prepared to deter or fight a new world war.
For years, I've worked closely with our Special Operations Forces community to ensure they have the resources to counter evolving threats. SOF is more than a counterterrorism force. They are indispensable in countering the malign activities of the Chinese Communist Party, Russia, and their authoritarian allies.
The NDAA for fiscal year 2026 has significant provisions to accelerate the technology acquisitions for Special Forces Command, in particular electronic warfare. It also establishes a pilot program to test new technologies and orders the Department of Defense to establish a strategy to implement and use biotechnologies to enhance human performance.
I must say I am deeply disappointed with the administration's fiscal year 2026 budget request for the Navy. In particular, I'm disturbed about the shipbuilding account.
The Senate's version of the NDAA increases defense funding by over $30 billion from the president's request. It orders that the Navy acquire 5, not 1, Columbia-class ballistic missile submarine, and also authorizes funds for the Air Force to acquire 100 B-21 Raiders, the next-generation stealth bomber.
The most sophisticated weapon system ever developed by mankind. They have a stealth capability to begin with, and it's very similar to what the F-22 fighter has today, similar to what the B-2 bomber has today, but on a more advanced level yet.
There is also an amendment in the Senate's version of the NDAA to change the name of the Department of Defense to Department of War.
We won the World War I, World War II. It was called the Department of War. And to me, that's really what it is. Its defense is a part of that. But I have a feeling we're going to be changing them.
The NDAA will also focus on cutting red tape for defense contractors to accelerate acquisitions for all military branches. The Senate must pass their version of the NDAA before October 1st. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Coming up, Secretary of State Marco Rubio heads to South America amid a U.S. naval deployment off the coast of Venezuela. We have that and more after the break.
Is deep-sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega-3. Eat 2 a day and you'll feel brand new.
I debate all day. It's what I do. But there are some things that are undebatable, like your mental health. I was in a dark place when my brother passed away in a car accident. I was depressed in ways I never imagined. I reached out, and my sisters came, my pastor, my therapist. They helped me get through it. I found that the more I spoke up, the healthier my mind became. When you love your mind, you can go so much further. Find mental health resources at loveyourmindtoday.org.
There's cultures that have been lost, but this culture hasn't been. The artist is showing us our sense of who we are, where we came from. You look at his hat. His hat is knitted probably by a man because a man traditionally knitted the hats. That hat tells you the story of who this person is, what his place in the culture is, the animals around him. Everything's all contained in the messages in the hat. And the tool that he's carrying over his shoulder. This is a centuries-old tool that has been able to rework the mountains. Those traditions are invaluable, and if we don't honor those traditions, then we're rootless. The artist is showing us the value of maintaining our culture and respecting our culture.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump moves the Space Command from Colorado to Alabama. What's behind the move and what Trump hopes to achieve with the Space Command. As the fiscal year will be coming to a close on September 30th, the Senate today begins debating next year's National Defense Authorization Act with a focus on war fighting. A federal judge in San Francisco ruled today that it wasn't lawful for the president to use the National Guard to protect immigration agents from Los Angeles protesters. Secretary of State Marco Rubio heads to South America amid a U.S. naval deployment off the coast of Venezuela. China is hosting leaders from nations such as North Korea and Russia this week. That's as Beijing and Moscow agreed to build a new pipeline despite Western sanctions. It's been 80 years since the creation of South and North Korea. We look at what happened with Korea divided into two separate nations.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
And thank you for staying with us. The U.S. Space Command will have a new headquarters. President Trump is making the announcement from the White House.
I am thrilled to report that the U.S. Space Command headquarters will move to the beautiful locale of a place called Huntsville, Alabama, forever to be known from this point forward as Rocket City.
The president says this move will result in more than 30,000 Alabama jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. The Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville finished first in both the Air Force's evaluation phase and selection phase in 2021. But the Biden administration chose to keep the Space Command in Colorado Springs. Colorado. Trump says moving the Space Command to Alabama is the right choice because he's concerned about universal mail-in voting in Colorado.
In my first term, I created a thing called Space Force, so important. You know, we were losing the race in space very badly to China and to Russia, and now we're far and away number one in space, and reestablished Space Com with a mission to protect American space assets and detect any threat to our homeland.
Trump says the Space Command in Huntsville will play a key role in building the Golden Dome, which will be America's missile defense shield, similar to the Iron Dome in Israel. The president says Canada wants to be covered by the dome as well, and he will work with them to work things out. Starting today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is starting a trip to Mexico and Ecuador. He's set to meet with their top officials to address illegal immigration and combat drug cartels. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley joins us. Jack, good to see you. What's the latest on Rubio's trip?
Good to see you too, Don. Well, right now we have some breaking news coming out of Trump's press conference where he told us that the U.S. has struck a Venezuelan ship, a ship from Venezuela carrying drugs, and that's after the U.S. deployed 4 warships to the region, and with a significant escalation now as the Venezuelan regime leader Nicolas Maduro has promised to fight against any attack from the U.S. Now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirming this attack earlier, saying that, as POTUS just announced moments ago on X, he said, today the U.S. military conducted a lethal strike in the southern Caribbean against a drug vessel which had departed from Venezuela and was being operated by a designated narco-terrorist organization. Here's some more. As the Trump administration works to crack down on cartels in South America, the U.S. has sent several warships to the region. That includes 3 guided missile destroyers and 1 guided missile cruiser, which was spotted off the coast of Venezuela. There's no indication that they would send ground troops, but 7 warships in total are expected in the region soon, along with 1 nuclear-powered submarine. Venezuelan regime leader Nicolas Maduro has already responded to this, deploying troops along its coast and border with Colombia.
Venezuela is facing the greatest threat that the continent has seen in the last 100 years. If Venezuela were attacked, it would immediately enter a period of armed struggle in defense of the national territory.
But the Trump administration's efforts to combat illegal immigration and drug cartels has shown a significant decline in criminal behavior. Customs and Border Patrol, in their most recent numbers, found a 93% decline in illegal border crossings at the southern border compared to this time last year. But some analysts say cartel activity is also down.
Obviously, some of these cartel forces and people that are moving things on that ocean are stopping. Large seizures of the kind that we haven't seen ever. Cartels are being dissolved. Sinaloa cartel is basically extinct now. There's just elements of it remaining. And coyotes at the border are struggling to remain in business.
Last month, the Trump administration doubled the reward for information leading to the arrest of Nicolas Maduro to $50 million. They accused Maduro of using cartels to traffic drugs like fentanyl and commit violent crimes in the U.S. These cartels traffic fentanyl into the U.S., which the precursor chemicals come from China. The DEA says fentanyl poisonings kill around 100,000 Americans every year. It's the number 1 cause of death of Americans aged 18 to 44. And right now, a bill is working its way through Congress called the Stop Chinese Fentanyl Act of 2025. And that's as the House Select Committee on the CCP last year in a report found that the Chinese Communist Party was directly subsidizing the export and manufacture of fentanyl precursor chemicals from China into South America, which makes its way into the U.S. Don.
All right, Jack, thank you for the report. The Senate is back in session, and their first order of business is the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026. Our Washington correspondent breaks down the most significant provisions on this important legislation.
As veterans commemorate the official surrender of the Empire of Japan and the end of World War II, lawmakers begin consideration of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026, a legislation with a focus on being prepared to deter or fight a new world war.
For years, I have worked closely with our Special Operations Forces community to ensure they have the resources to counter evolving threats. SOF is more than a counterterrorism force. They are indispensable in countering the malign activities of the Chinese Communist Party, Russia, and their authoritarian allies.
The NDAA for fiscal year 2026 has significant provisions to accelerate the technology acquisitions for Special Forces Command, in particular electronic warfare. It also establishes a pilot program to test new technologies and orders the Department of Defense to establish a strategy to implement and use biotechnologies to enhance human performance.
I must say I am deeply disappointed with the administration's fiscal year 2026 budget request for the Navy. In particular, I'm disturbed about the shipbuilding account.
The Senate's version of the NDAA increases defense funding by over $30 billion from the president's request. It orders that the Navy acquire 5, not 1, Columbia-class ballistic missile submarine, and also authorizes funds for the Air Force to acquire 100 B-21 Raiders, the next-generation stealth bomber.
The most sophisticated weapon system ever developed by mankind. They have a stealth capability to begin with, and it's very similar to what the F-22 fighter has today, similar to what the B-2 bomber has today, but on a more advanced level yet.
There is also an amendment in the Senate's version of the NDAA to change the name of the Department of Defense to Department of War.
We won the World War I, World War II. It was called the Department of War. And to me, that's really what it is. Its defense is a part of that. But I have a feeling we're going to be changing them.
The NDAA will also focus on cutting red tape for defense contractors to accelerate acquisitions for all military branches. The Senate must pass their version of the NDAA before October 1st. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
A federal judge in San Francisco today ruled that the Trump administration violated federal law when it mobilized nearly 5,000 of California's National Guard troops to quell protesters in Los Angeles. NTD's Arlene Richards has the details.
In a lengthy opinion issued on Tuesday, U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer ruled the Trump administration illegally federalized members of the state National Guard in June to address violent protests against immigration agents and federal officials. A 3-day trial that ended August 13th addressed the actions of the military after they were deployed. The administration mobilized troops to Los Angeles after protesters objected to immigration agents conducting arrests of illegal immigrants. Breyer said although the protests became violent, there was no rebellion. He concluded that no federal law gave the president the authority to take such action where local law enforcement was willing to act. The administration had argued that the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. It said in filings that due to the violent nature of the protests, including throwing rocks at agents and blocking them, the president must ensure federal personnel and facilities are protected. Breyer said local law enforcement was able to respond to the protests and enforce the law. He questioned whether or not the administration properly coordinated with state officials before the deployment. Troops remained active during the trial due to a federal appeals court unanimously ruling in July that the president's actions were likely lawful. The administration demobilized nearly all National Guard troops in July, with about 300 remaining. Breyer is permitting the guards to remain in place until 12 noon on September 12th. The Trump administration is expected to appeal the decision. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The Justice Department is suing Illinois for providing in-state tuition and scholarships for students in the U.S. illegally. The DOJ argues that the policies discriminate against American citizens. The department says institutions of higher education violate federal law by providing benefits to illegal aliens that are not offered to U.S. citizens. According to the complaint, quote, Illinois has an apparent desire to win a race to the bottom as the country's leading sanctuary state. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Illinois said, quote, this policy treats illegal aliens better than U.S. citizens in living other states. The U.S. Attorney said that such policies incentivize illegal immigration, adding, quote, Illinois citizens deserve better. The Trump administration has been cleared to nix climate grants approved by his predecessor. A previous judge had required the administration to continue funding $16 billion worth of grants. Those grants were meant to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Today, a federal appeals court overturned that judge's ruling. This allows the Environmental Protection Agency to terminate the grants. A Michigan home is listed as Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook's primary residence, but who lives there? A local reporter went to find out. Take a look at that after the break.
Save big at Mathis Home with Labor Day deals in every department. Check out their new arrivals and save big on the latest living rooms. This reclining sofa is a great example of their unbeatable prices. It's just $449. Where else can you find a sofa with 2 built-in recliners for just $449? With their incredible selection, you're sure to find the sofa just right for you. Plus, they're all in stock, so you can take it home today or get it delivered absolutely free. Hurry in, these deals won't last long. Now through Labor Day, only at Mathis Home.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, I have an important message about security. Write down the number on your screen so you can call when I finish. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. This is a lock for your life insurance, a rate lock that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. But be careful. Many policies you see do not have one. But you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. Call this number to learn more. This plan was designed with a rate lock for people on a fixed income who want life insurance that fits their budget and is simple to get. Coverage options start at $9.95 a month, less than 35 cents a day. Act now, and your rate will be locked in for life. It will never increase, guaranteed. This is lifelong coverage that can never be canceled as long as you pay your premiums, guaranteed. And your acceptance is guaranteed, with no health questions. You cannot be turned down because of your health. Call for your information kit and read about this rate lock for yourself. You'll also get a free beneficiary planner. Both are free with no obligation. Don't miss out. Call for information, then decide. Read about the 30-day 100% money-back guarantee. Don't wait. Call this number now.
Call now and you'll also get this free beneficiary planner. Use this valuable guide to record important information and your final wishes, and it's yours free just for calling. So don't wait. Call 1-800-357-4821 for your free information. That's 1-800-357-4821. There's no risk or obligation. That number again is 1-800-357-4821. That's 1-800-357-4821. 1-800-357-4821. Call now.
From cracking down on crime in D.C. to tariffs and the war in Ukraine, this morning President Trump shared his thoughts on a wide range of topics with radio host Scott Jennings.
We have no crime in D.C. It's cleaned up. It's in great shape. You can go out to dinner, the restaurants. It took me 12 days, and I'm very disappointed in President Putin. I can say that, and we'll be doing something to help people live. You know, it's not a question of Ukraine. It's how people live. 7,000 people are dying every single week.
Jennings shared highlights of his call with the president on a special edition of his radio show. During the chat, President Trump expressed his disappointment in Russian President Vladimir Putin. This is over the war in Ukraine and not being able to reach a peace deal in Alaska last month. The president also boasted about how successful it has been sending the National Guard to Washington, D.C. This led to talking about violence and leadership in Chicago. Trump did not share a timeline, but said it's going to be happening there, like when he sent National Guard troops to Los Angeles. Jennings noted that the topic that was on top of mind for the president this morning was clearly tariffs.
It will be a disaster if that is lost for our country. Our country will be weak, pathetic, and not rich. It will be, I've put us in a position, even negotiating. I negotiated 7 peace deals because I was able to use tariffs. Without tariffs, many of those deals, half of those deals, I wouldn't have been able to do. It gives us tremendous negotiating power.
This is in response to the Federal Trade Court of Appeals ruling last week that most of the president's tariff policies are unconstitutional. The court has left tariffs in place while the administration appeals the ruling to the Supreme Court. The president described the decision as an overhang and an emergency. In fact, he said they'll probably have an emergency meeting about it tomorrow. President Trump also charged that it is foreign companies who had filed this case. He went on to agree with Jennings that tariffs are both an economic and diplomatic tool. He added that it's the single most powerful word in the world. A new twist in the controversy over Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook's mortgage fraud allegations. Cook has been accused of her setting her primary residence in Georgia and Michigan. A reporter with the Michigan Enjoyer went to the Ann Arbor home listed under Cook's name to see who was living there.
Hello? How you doing?
Okay, how are you?
I'm good. My name's Charlie. I'm a reporter. This house is in the news. I was wondering if Lisa Cook lives here, or do you rent?
No, we're just renting, so you'll have to...
I'm sorry?
You'll have to talk to me.
Reporter Charlie LaDuff shared this video of him speaking to a person at a home Cook has listed as her primary residence. This comes as the Supreme Court is trying to decide whether President Trump's firing of her was legal. That move made President Trump the first American president to try to remove a governor from the Federal Reserve. At the same time, a federal judge is trying to decide if Cook can stay on the job until the justices decide. Hundreds of economists have signed an open letter to the president over his attempt to fire Cook. They claim this threatens the central bank's independence and erodes trust. The Trump administration is preparing to defend its sweeping tariffs in the Supreme Court. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, says the case is critical to both America's economy and the fight against fentanyl. Here's the story.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he's confident the Supreme Court will uphold President Trump's tariffs. Bessent told Reuters Monday he's finalizing a legal brief for the U.S. Solicitor General, underscoring the urgency of the tariffs. The Solicitor General will oversee the government's appeal to the Supreme Court. The move comes after a divided appeals court ruled Friday that most of the tariffs are illegal, but allowed them to remain in place until October 14th while the case advances. Bessent says the tariffs are justified under emergency powers, citing both rising trade deficits and the fentanyl crisis linked to about 70,000 American deaths each year. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro issued a stark warning on Monday, saying the fate of the United States rests in the court's hands.
This case is arguably the single most important economic case that has ever come before the Supreme Court.
He said if the lower court's ruling is upheld, it will be impossible for America to defend itself from fentanyl poisoning and what he called the hollowing out of supply chains.
By the end of the day, we'll lose another couple of hundred Americans. It's over 1 million since the fentanyl war against America started. And if that's not a national emergency, I don't know what is.
Secretary Bessent told Reuters the brief would be submitted Tuesday or Wednesday. He said it would focus on the idea that U.S. trade deficits were reaching a tipping point that could lead to far greater consequences. At the same time, Bessent said the administration is considering the declaration of a national housing emergency over high costs. That could mean tariff exemptions on key building materials to help lower construction costs. Bessent also spoke to Reuters about Trump's firing of Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. He said that Cook should be removed or step down if the allegations against her are true, and noted that she had not denied them. Trump fired Cook last week after the new head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, William Poulter, accused her of mortgage fraud. Cook is suing the Trump administration, saying Trump did not have the legal authority to remove her.
India's trade minister says his country is looking for a deal with the U.S. His comments come after Washington doubled the tariffs on goods from India in response to New Delhi's continued imports of Russian oil. A punitive 25% tariff adds to President Donald Trump's prior 25% duty on products from India. Total duties as high as 50% will hit garments, jewelry, footwear, sporting goods, among other imports. The tariff is among the highest imposed by the U.S., similar to tariffs applied to Brazil and China. U.S.-India trade totaled $129 billion in 2024. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in China to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, but he will not be showing up to the massive military parade in Beijing tomorrow. The parade marks 80 years of the end of World War II and the victory over Japan. Indian sources say the Indian delegation will currently visit China and not attend the military parade. They say they don't want to hurt relations with the Japanese government. India, Japan, the U.S., and Australia are all members of the Quad military cooperation framework. Modi is in China for a summit backed by the Chinese regime, which signaled opposition to the U.S. But his visit to China came right after he visited Japan and emphasized their strong ties. Elon Musk's AI startup xAI is suing a Chinese national for allegedly stealing sensitive trade secrets. He worked there as an engineer. He's being accused of storing the information on personal hard drives and sending them off to major competitor OpenAI. Here's Tiffany Meyer from NTD's China in Focus.
The complaint filed on Thursday says that Xuchen Li stole sensitive information about advanced AI technologies. The company claims this technology is capable of surpassing the rival company OpenAI's ChatGPT, and Li intended on passing the information over to them. With the stolen data, OpenAI can save billions in development and research. Li joined xAI last year. Notably, he was among the 20 earliest engineers working on Grok, the chatbot for xAI. This gave him broad access to the key sensitive technology early on. The company says he stole its trade secrets in July, right after accepting a job offer from OpenAI. Li also went on to sell $7 million worth of xAI stock before quitting the company. According to the lawsuit, Li admitted to copying sensitive data onto personal hard drives and trying to hide his activity in mid-August. xAI is now asking the court to fine Li for damages and block him from taking the new job at OpenAI.
Li has not responded to media requests for comment. And for more exclusive China news and in-depth analysis, tune in to China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer at 9 p.m. Eastern right here on NTD. Microsoft has agreed to give government agencies a discount on its cloud services. Today's announcement from the General Services Administration comes as the White House looks to make deals with tech companies. According to the GSA and Microsoft, the deal will save the federal government up to $3 billion in the first year. As part of the agreement, the company will offer free access to Microsoft Copilot to existing federal government users. Copilot is Microsoft's AI chatbot. Agencies can also get lower prices on cloud products such as Microsoft Sentinel and Azure Monitoring. The GSA has announced similar deals in recent weeks. In August, the government announced that Google and Amazon Web Services had agreed to discounts. Still to come, 80 years after Korea's independence from Japanese colonial rule. Find out what led to the creation of South and North Korea, the two distinct nations we know today. That and more when we return.
Hi, I'm Ryan Blaney, a third-generation race car driver, and we dedicate a lot of our time to going as fast as possible. My grandpa Lou is the reason why my dad and I started racing, and I'm really proud to follow in his tracks. But when my grandpa was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a very unexpected bump in the road for us. I've learned a lot on this journey with my grandpa Lou, and the memories of my grandpa will always be with me. And in our family, we're used to getting involved, and I encourage you to do the same, especially when it comes to caring for your loved ones. When I think about Alzheimer's and the impact it had on my family, I recognize that losing a race isn't such a bad day after all. It's important to notice if older family members are acting differently, experiencing problems with their memory, or having trouble with routine tasks. Talking about Alzheimer's can be really tough, but if you notice something, have a conversation with your loved one. Encourage them to see a doctor or offer to go with them. Early detection of Alzheimer's can give your family time to explore support services, make a plan for the future, and access available treatments. If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
You see certain things get reincarnated in your children. My daughter is very much inspired by my wife's artistic pursuits. So my daughter started making necklaces. She makes what we call affirmation fashion. I tell her every day that your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. And if there's anything better than being beautiful, it's being smart. And if there's anything better than being smart, it's being kind. And reaffirming that every day is our method of making sure her chin never drops. My dad wasn't around. And I remember riding a bike and falling off and cutting myself, and me never just wanted to get back on it. People ask, how your children learn how to ride a bike, and you didn't. I didn't teach them. I just created an environment where they taught themselves, and all I had to do was be there.
China is hosting leaders from nations like North Korea, Russia, and others this week. They're using the anniversary of the end of World War II to strengthen ties and possibly counter Western nations. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has more.
The motorcade of North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un was seen in downtown Beijing on Tuesday. Also in China is Russian President Vladimir Putin. All three countries are being criticized by the West over their roles in the Ukraine war. China continues supporting Russia's economy, while North Korea has been sending troops to the front lines. In his opening remarks, Putin addressed Chinese leader Xi Jinping as a dear friend, while praising the strong relation Russia has been building with China.
Dear friend, both I and the entire Russian delegation are pleased to meet once again. Our close communication reflects the strategic nature of Russia-China relations, which are at an unprecedentedly high level.
Xi recently set out a vision for a new global security and economic order. He challenged the US and the West and called for a closer cooperation among non-Western leaders. And also on Tuesday, Russia and China agreed to build a new pipeline called the Power of Siberia 2. This comes despite US sanctions on China for doing business with Russia, thus funding the Ukraine war. The Oxford Institute for Energy Studies says the message is China is no longer even pretending to comply with US sanctions or care about what the West thinks. However, so far it's only an agreement. Much remains unclear, such as pricing, building and timeframes, none of which were announced. And at least one top Russian executive says China is actually moving towards energy independence. Arian Pasdar, NTD News.
And President Trump said he has been watching the situation closely to see what would come out next. In a radio interview earlier, President Trump said he's, quote, very disappointed in Russian President Vladimir Putin. That's because Russia hasn't followed through on promises made during their summit in Alaska 2 weeks ago. Instead, attacks on Ukraine have been increasing again. Today marks the 80th anniversary of Imperial Japan's formal surrender to the United States at the end of World War II. A ceremony at the National World War II Memorial honored veterans of the deadliest armed conflict in history. Here's a World War II veteran speaking.
War is not funny. War is not pleasant. The aftermath of war is not funny. The aftermath of war is not necessarily pleasant. It is only pleasant because we took the time to be here at your gracious invitation to meet us and meet this. We are flesh and blood. Meet us and shake our hands and find out who we were and what we did.
As part of the ceremony, World War II veterans placed wreaths at the memorial's Freedom Wall, paying tribute to their fallen brothers and sisters. On September 2nd, 1945, Japanese officials surrendered to U.S. forces on board the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. VJ Day followed Victory in Europe Day months earlier. Known as VE Day, Nazi Germany surrendered to the Allies on May 8, 1945. In total, an estimated 70 to 85 million people died during the Second World War. Joining us now to discuss is retired U.S. Marine Colonel Grant Newsroom. He was the first U.S. Marine liaison officer to the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force. He is also a senior fellow with the Center for Security Policy. Colonel, thank you very much for joining us today. So the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II also marks 80 years since Korea was divided in two separate nations, North and South Korea, as we know it today. So first off, could you walk us through the how and why it happened?
Sure. Well, what happened as World War II ended, the atom bombs were dropped, Japan surrendered. They had to figure out some way to take the Japanese surrender up on the Korean peninsula. So two American officers basically decided that about halfway down would be the right place to do it. And they made sure Seoul was just on the southern side of the boundary, and that's where the 38th parallel came from. The idea was that eventually there would be sort of an international group that monitored or ran the peninsula, but the Russians and the Russians didn't cooperate. So the Russians took the north half, and then eventually a war broke out about 5 years later, and we ended up about where we started. So Korea is divided between the communist north, which is a starving hellhole, and the prosperous south, which is democratic now.
How different was occupation under the Soviet Union in the north to occupation under the U.S. in the south?
Well, you never wanted to have Soviet troops occupying your territory, certainly if you were a female in any of those places. It was heavy-handed, rape was common. And what they did is they put in place ultimately a local communist regime. Any chance of ever having freedom on the peninsula up north was gone. The southern part, well, it had problems as well, but that you can see how things turned out pretty well. Also, U.S. occupation is always very different than when just about anyone else does it, and certainly regimes like the Soviets. So it took a while, as I said, for the South to not necessarily get its act together, but to become more prosperous, economically successful, to have the political stability necessary to turn into a thriving, vibrant democracy.
And on that point, can you go a bit deeper into what events took place in the years following the split, including any attempts to reunite Korea?
Oh, yeah. The Korean War, which started in 1950, was the Russians giving the communist North Koreans the approval to head south, to attack the South. The Chinese got in on it as well. They were initially successful. The Americans and the South Koreans were able to hold the line way down on the southern end of the peninsula. And then with an end run by MacArthur and the Marines at Incheon up on the sort of the northwest, they were able to cut off the communists and send them packing back up north. The Americans got all the way to the Yalu River, the Chinese border, and the Chinese came in huge numbers, pushed them back, and then the Americans and the South Koreans counterattacked. But ultimately, it just settled down around the 38th parallel. And over some years, the South Koreans developed from an authoritarian administration, a regime, into a very prosperous economy. Now it's the world's 10th or 11th largest economy, and they became democratic with all the freedoms we take for granted by the early 1990s. And that's about where we stand today. North Korea hasn't changed much, but South Korea has really prospered and shown that they can handle freedom. No surprise there. Although the current South Korean administration is decidedly leftist, is at heart pro-North Korea, pro-China, and anti-American. Go figure. But most South Koreans value the U.S. relationship with Korea. And also they are not interested in being like North Korea or China. So that's a challenge for this leftist regime. So that's where we stand today.
So you mentioned that North Korea hasn't changed that much. What aspects of North Korea operates today, and how it operates, can that be tied to its origins under the Soviet Union?
Well, it was very much a dictatorship set up by the Soviets with the Kim family. It's basically the Kim criminal family regime is a better way to look at it. Now we're on the third Kim Jong-un. And it is a place with zero human rights, zero freedoms. The entire nation serves for one purpose, and that is to keep the Kim family prosperous and, colloquial terms, fat and happy. But it is as unhappy a place as you will find on earth. And when you have mass starvation every now and then, well, that gives you some sense of how things are. But the money that should go into feeding the populace goes into maintaining a military, building nuclear weapons, building missiles, submarines, etc. So it's something that the world has seen before, but there's not many places quite like North Korea on Earth today.
So a bit more on South Korea. If you could just pinpoint one action of the U.S. in South Korea, what would it be that led it to become the nation and government that we know today?
Well, it was American forces, largely, that went into South Korea when it was on the verge of being taken over by the communists in 1950. And ultimately, somewhere around 40,000 Americans were killed defending South Korea so that it could develop into a free place. And I think that was the issue. That was the defining moment, was when Americans, and there's a monument I've seen down in southern South Korea in Pohang, which is to the 1st Marine Division, and it says 1st Marine Brigade, and it says this monument is to free men who came across the ocean to save us. And that pretty much sums up what happened. It was Americans, the British, and Commonwealth forces, and some others who ultimately came along and pushed back the communists and gave South Korea the breathing room to develop into a free society, a prosperous economy. And there weren't many of those in Asia, and there haven't been since. So I say that was the defining moment. But ultimately, it's the South Koreans themselves who, over the couple decades, managed to move towards a democratic society, and their own hard work turned it into a prosperous place. So the American-led forces saved them. And there was also a Japanese role in that, which doesn't get the attention it deserves, particularly in naval support and minesweeping support during the Korean War. So that gave South Korea the breathing room to develop into the kind of country it became. Now the test is whether or not South Korea can keep it.
Okay, Colonel, with the limited time that we have left, I want to ask you about recent reports that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un crossed into China by train to attend a military parade marking the 80th anniversary of Japan surrendering World War II. You already know that Russian President Vladimir Putin will be attending. What do you make of all this, the whole situation?
Well, we've never seen the North Koreans, the Russians, and the Chinese get together or get along as well as they are today. The North Koreans have obviously helped the Russians in Ukraine with material, ammunition, and a lot of troops. And the Chinese have been equally supportive of the Russians. And ultimately, the North Koreans have gotten approval from the Chinese for everything they've done to assist the Russians. The Chinese have benefited from the big distraction this is to the United States, to the West, to have to focus on Ukraine. And to the Chinese, they'd like to keep it going. So this is sort of a win-win from Xi Jinping's perspective. I say we've never seen these three countries get along like this. We may laugh at them, but put together when their strategic interests align, they can cause no end of trouble.
Well, Colonel Newsroom, it's always great to hear your insight. Thank you for your time today.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
A British comedian was arrested over 3 social media posts after landing back in the UK from a trip to Arizona. The case has stirred up renewed free speech concerns over British police arresting people for voicing opinions on the internet. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more.
British comedy writer Graham Linehan was arrested by 5 armed police officers at London's Heathrow Airport on Monday after returning from Arizona. Why? For 3 gender-critical posts on social media in what has become a free speech issue. Linehan said he spent a night in a cell and was questioned over posts he published on X 4 months ago in April, and was taken to hospital after a nurse found his blood pressure was at over 200. That's stroke territory. He said the stress of being arrested for jokes was threatening his life. In one of the posts, he wrote, "If a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he is committing a violent abusive act. Make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him in the balls." In another, he posted a picture of a trans rights demonstration with the caption, "A photo you can smell." A Metropolitan Police spokeswoman said officers had arrested a man on Monday on suspicion of inciting violence and in relation to posts on X. She said he has been bailed pending further investigation. Linehan said his bail conditions ban him from using X, formerly known as Twitter, which he says is a gag order to keep him quiet while in the UK. Linehan's case has triggered a broad backlash. Harry Potter author and campaigner J.K. Rowling said the arrest was totalitarianism and utterly deplorable, while Elon Musk accused the UK of being a police state. British Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick described it as being ridiculous and a complete waste of police time. He highlighted the contrast that police only respond to 1 in 5 reported shoplifting offences, but deployed 5 armed officers to arrest a comedian over 3 tweets. Labour Party politician Jonathan Hinder said the arrest showed the need for a serious reset to get the priorities right in policing. Meanwhile, Reform UK party leader Nigel Farage is set to raise the arrest as part of free speech discussions with allies of President Trump in Washington this week. The British Prime Minister's office declined to comment on Linehan's arrest. A spokesman said it was an operational matter for police, but added the Prime Minister has been clear priorities should be on tackling crimes like shoplifting and knife violence. The Free Speech Union said they do not believe Linehan's arrest or bail conditions are lawful and will support Linehan's legal defense. Trump's administration has repeatedly raised the issue of free speech in Europe. Last month, Vice President J.D. Vance warned Britain not to go down the very dark path of censorship and told British Foreign Secretary David Lammy the West had become too comfortable with censoring rather than engaging with other opinions. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Coming up, France's famed dining culture is under strain as restaurants lose customers. NTD's David Vivez brings us a closer look after the break.
Focus on beauty, showcase nature, share kindness, feel brightness, capture the beautiful moments in your eyes. Your works will be showcased in galleries and on multiple online platforms, appreciated and collected. Please visit photo.ntdtv.com.
What if kids in America didn't have to go to bed hungry tonight? What if our moms, dads, and grandparents could put healthy food on the table every day to help us grow strong? What if all of our friends and neighbors had fresh food too, and there was no hunger at all in America? And what if there was a way today for you to help? Call now or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, just 63 cents a day. So many of us don't have enough food to eat, but your monthly gift means families across the country and in your community can fill plates with food. Kids can get healthy meals year-round, even when school's out, and our neighbors can have fresh food. Food that moms, dads, entire families need to thrive. But right now, more people are facing hunger. Feeding America works from coast to coast with partner food banks, food pantries, and meal programs. It takes all of us to make that happen. Will you help too? Please call the number on your screen or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give just $19 a month, and we'll send you this free canvas grocery bag. It's our way of saying thank you for helping to end hunger for our neighbors. Because no kid, no mom or dad, nobody should go hungry in America. Nobody. So what if today was the day you could help nourish futures for our friends, our families, for all of us? Ending hunger is possible. What if we end it together? Call or give online today at helpfeedingamerica.org and your gift can be doubled. Thank you.
We said we'd never break the 3-second rule. Never do that. And never become a minivan mom.
Hey, Chris.
As parents, We say never a lot, but never happens. So when you say you'd never leave your child in a hot car, know it can happen. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
Nearly a year after his re-election, President Trump's supporters say he's following through on a major campaign promise. At the same time, they express a range of opinions on the Trump administration's enforcement actions. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on how some Trump voters view the issue.
President Trump ran on a platform of cracking down on illegal immigration. Almost a year after his election, voters are weighing in on his performance. New York State resident Gerald Dunn says it's a mixed bag.
For the most part, I think Trump's done okay. You know, I'm not disappointed in his performance. I don't necessarily like everything that he does, but I don't hate everything he does either.
That said, Dunn, 66, says he believes Trump is following through on one of his biggest campaign promises.
I think that he is on the right track trying to round up these criminals that are in the country illegally and deporting them. And that's the biggest thing. I think his biggest success is on immigration up to this point.
Retiree Don Jerrigan agrees. The Virginia Beach resident says the president has made good on one of his most significant pledges.
Well, they pretty much shut down the border. And that's why they were elected, was to keep millions of people from illegally coming across the border.
Jernigan also points to the importance of treating people with dignity, even if they're in the U.S. illegally.
People need to be treated like they're people. There's no two ways about that.
In suburban Chicago, Kate Model says she supports Trump's immigration policies, particularly when it comes to illegal immigrants who commit violent crimes.
These are bad people. They don't need to be here. The child rapists, the sexual predators, the criminals, the gang members.
While Model says cracking down on illegal immigration is important to her, she also says there's likely a compromise to be made for otherwise law-abiding individuals who are in the U.S. illegally.
I have friends, too, who are in the country without status, but they're good people, and they're hardworking people, and that's what we want.
Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Alphabet's Google must share data with rivals to open up competition in online search. A judge in Washington ruled today, while rejecting prosecutors' bid to make the internet giant sell off its popular Chrome browser and Android operating system. Google CEO Sundar Pichai expressed concerns at trial in the case in April that the data sharing measures sought by the Department of Justice could enable Google's rivals to reverse engineer its technology. Google has said previously that it plans to file an appeal, which means it could take years before the company is required to act on the ruling. A district judge also barred Google from entering into exclusive agreements that would prohibit device makers from pre-installing rival products on new devices. France's famed dining culture is under strain as restaurants lose customers. Rising prices, tighter budgets, and new habits are reshaping how people eat out, leaving many restaurant owners struggling to adapt. NTD's international correspondent David Revez reports from Paris.
France is known for its long lunches and lingering dinners. However, many restaurant owners said they've seen fewer customers lately. Professional points to rising prices, driven by inflation as a key factor. According to the Hospitality Union, restaurant attendance fell 15 to 20% in July and August, with some regions seeing drops of up to 30%. Diners are also ordering less, skipping starters, sharing desserts, and choosing a glass of wine instead of a bottle. Restaurant owner Alain Fontaine says this is part of a trend that began 5 years ago.
In fact, just to assess how dangerous the situation is, 25 restaurants are closing every day. Since the COVID crisis, there has been a clear acceleration. There was a slow decline before, now there is a sharp one. We are seeing more bankruptcies, the desertification of restaurants, and a shift in consumption habits.
He says there are many factors behind the shift, in addition to the rising cost of living. Fontaine says remote work after COVID has encouraged people to order food deliveries instead of dining out.
We let the French and tourists go to fast food restaurants, steam restaurants, and others. And that's something the government needs to respond to today. Because that's a fact. In 2030, or rather in 2040, there will be no more traditional restaurants in France as you know them if we don't react.
Fontaine is a restaurant owner who continues to practice what's called traditional French cuisine, a menu priced between $16 and $27 on average, including starter, main course and dessert, made with fresh ingredients and with dishes rooted in French culinary traditions. While some French restaurant owners have chosen not to raise prices and still manage to do well, newcomers to the restaurant world face very steep challenges. He says there's hope to change the shift, pointing to tourism as a major supporter of French cuisine.
We know that 43% of tourists who come to France come for the food, for the appeal of the food. When Americans come in and see the decor and hear the way we talk, the way we express ourselves, and taste the food and say amazing, it's like a medal for me every time. That's it. We have to save that. We must remain optimistic. There is a generation of young people who are truly enthusiastic and passionate about this profession. As I said, we will have to give them the means to communicate, but we must also be careful to reintroduce restaurants in local communities.
In September 2024, Fontaine succeeded in having French restaurants and cafes added to UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage list. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Suntory's CEO, one of Japan's best-known business leaders, has resigned from the beverage group. The move follows a police investigation into his purchase of illegal supplements. Here are the details.
The boss of Japanese drinks giant Suntory has resigned following a police investigation into his purchase of a possibly illegal supplement. Takeshi Ninami is an outspoken business leader who often served as the face of corporate Japan at Davos and other such events. He has told the company he took the supplement believing it to be legal. Earlier, the Tokyo Shimbun newspaper said police were probing whether he was sent supplements containing cannabis components connected to a man who was arrested in July. Officers reportedly questioned Ninami and searched his Tokyo home, though the paper says no illegal drug possession or use has been confirmed. The executive is also head of Japan's powerful Keizai Doyukai business lobby and has advised several of the country's prime ministers. A Harvard Business School graduate, Ninami was previously chief executive of the Lawson convenience store chain. He then became the first head of Suntory from outside its founding family. The firm owns numerous domestic and international brands ranging from Jim Beam bourbon to Lucozade energy drinks.
Thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a bit. Stay with us. I'm Don Ma, and remember to watch NTD Evening News at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific.